You better be listening to Sleazoids or I must break you.
It happens in an amazing castle with a tickle-em-to-death torture chamber and a 500-player piano with 480,000 keys. It's a musical merry-go-round, sparkling with songs and dances, whirling you away to a new world of wonder.
Have a smoke. Have a cigar.
Don't mind if I do.
Something to eat.
Look, then run for your life. Incredible is the word for the world's first monster musical. See in magnificent Eastman color, the daring, dancing, enticing, and horrifying. From the innocence of music and laughter comes the twilight of terror. Along the midway, scantily clad dancers, luring the young lovers into the sideshows.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Sleazoids, the podcast where we go down the rabbit hole of 20th century genre fare, from the most influential canon classics to the trashiest exploitation films we can get our hands on, and invite you to tag along in helping us create a canon of sleaze. Each week is a double feature grindhouse style where we discuss two films loosely related by subject, genre, actor, filmmaker, or franchise, and at the end of each episode, along with our honorary Sleazoid, which you can become by subscribing on Patreon.
Next week, we are going spooky mode again with some haunted houses, so join that sleaze.
That's right. Patreon subscribers also get an on-air shout-out and 2 bonus episodes every single month, which we have been doing for 6+ years. There's like 160 bonus episodes, as well as our bonus transmission series, where we talk about new release genre films, which there's over 50 of at this point. So if you haven't made the jump yet, patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast, we do recommend. And speaking of which, we had a lot of people make the jump this week, so we're going to give them their shout-outs real quick here. We had Jonathan Ross sign up at $5 a month. We had Ryan Miller sign up. We had Andy A, Chris Bench. We had Evan Laffer of the Joker Man podcast, I believe. We are actually fans of the Joker Man podcast around here, so thanks to Evan for signing up. We had Austin B sign up at the annual tier because you can get a little bit of a discounted rate monthly if you sign up for an entire year in advance, so thanks to Austin for doing that. We also had Ben Olson showing up. Sign up, Lachlan Saunders, Jeffro Lane, Seguros, James Leggett, Anthony Cabrera, McAllen 12, Marcus Baccarella, Jacob Moore, Catherine Woods, who signed up at the $10 a month tier and will be joining us for the monthly virtual screenings that we do on the last Thursday of every given month. We also had Inversal sign up for $10 a month as well, so thanks to both of you. We had Matt Stokes sign up. We had Robert Carney, Owen Thomas, Scott, Sean Guralnik, and last but not least, Lars Sigurdslid. So thanks so much to all of you folks. We appreciate that support a lot. Hope you're enjoying those bonus episodes.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
That's the one plug. The other plug, as always, is Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're listening on either one of those platforms, and I can see the stats, I can see you right now listening on both those platforms, give us a good old rating and review over there. It helps us climb the ranks and find new listeners. And the last plug, as always, is merch. If you like the based... look at me jumping around. If you like the poster art that based out of Toronto horror artist Trevor Henderson did for our show, you can get that put on basically anything that you guys can think of. And you freaks have thought of a lot of stuff. You guys have gotten notebooks. You guys have gotten pillows, coffee mugs, hoodies. If you're interested in that at all, the link is in the description of this episode, as well as over at sleazoidspodcast.com. But that is the last plug, and that is it for the intro. Welcome back to another week. As always, I am your host, Josh Lewis, and joining me also, as always, my co-host,
Jamie Miller. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome. I believe 2 weeks ago would have been the last time you folks over on the main feed would have heard from us, or we would have had special returning guest, our Australian correspondent from down under, Mr.
World
Andrew
champion.
Law of the Bunta Vista podcast, making his 7th appearance, waving the belt over everyone. And he brought with him some science fiction, horror, crime thrillers centered around virtual reality technology. We talked Catherine Bigelow's cyberpunk techno horror apocalypse meets voyeuristic conspiratorial LA noir. Lots of genre bending with Strange Days from 1995, which had some just incredible point of view photography and Steadicam work and harrowing depictions of racist and sexist violence for a mainstream studio movie written by James Cameron in it. We were kind of blown away.
Yeah,
and
well, still having that kind of almost cartoonish, over the top 90s quality of it all. So it's something to behold. That mixture of things is pretty insane.
It was, and we paired it with Tarsum Singh's on the flip side, gruesome serial killer of the week procedural meets like therapeutic dream sharing surrealism in his movie called The Cell from the year 2000, which we kind of described as like a post-Matrix pre-Inception type deal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I mean, Tarsum Singh knocks it out of the park with the production design. I mean, I love the look of his movies. It gets a little wonky when it comes to the psychology aspect of the whole thing, but I mean, you don't really care once you see D'Onofrio in a
we both left
outfit.
that film with a lot of questions about how schizophrenia actually works, but Vincent D'Onofrio is wilding out, so sometimes it's worth it.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, if you haven't heard that episode, that was 2 weeks ago over on the main feed. Go back and check it out. But last week over on the Patreon feed, we did a very special sequel episode to our episode with Steve Carlson, where we talked about shot on video horror. We did an episode on Boarding House and on Red Spirit Lake, 2 movies that he introduced us to for the first time. And we did a follow-up where we wanted to talk more about the scuzzy and surreal no-budget American art horror filmmaker Charles Pinion, with a double feature of his 1988 Florida skater punk music documentary turned disgusting stream of consciousness splatter movie called Twisted Issues, and we paired it with his 1996 psychedelic drug-induced San Francisco update on the Tobe Hooper-esque Cannibal Family horror film called We Await, 2 films that were just filled with insane amounts of gross and trippy and noisy hypnotic imagery, and really resourceful in terms of turning the videotape limitation into this very sort of crude and painterly kind of lo-fi aesthetic that we had a lot of fun talking about.
Oh yeah, and one of my favorite aspects was specifically, I guess, with Twisted Issues was the music that was involved, just the different kind of types of genres and subgenres, and some of the scenes you wouldn't think like would have that kind of soundtrack over, and it creates this kind of strange effect that I really loved. So yeah, that was
we were
partway
partway through, we were chanting like these streets are very ugly, at a certain point. Exactly. We were having a good time. So if you haven't heard that episode, that was patreon.com/Sleazoids podcast over on the Patreon feed last week, exclusively for those listeners. But moving on to this week, we have a very special guest joining us. In fact, the subject of last week's episode himself, the wonderful underground outsider artist who blended his interest with music and visual art with all kinds of spontaneous and gruesome, extreme horror comedy. That guest is Mr. Charles Pinion. Charles, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Good to have you, man.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's.
I might have to become a Patreon member just to hear those reviews.
We will send it to you.
episodes.
You do not need to do that. It would be absolutely our pleasure. We are
awesome.
very stoked to have you, and this is something of a crazy journey for our show because, as I kind of mentioned at the top, a longtime friend and guest of the show who we go to every week for his dumpster diving recommendations that he gives us. And when he selected doing Boarding House and Red Spirit Lake as being like, you guys are called the Sleazoids podcast, at some point you need to talk on shot on video horror. You haven't done it yet, and Red Spirit Lake really honestly shocked us and kind of blew us away, and but just how anarchic and how surreal and noisy, and it was, and obviously the do-it-yourself guerrilla production style of it was right down our alley, and we were so stoked about it. So we're very happy to have you here and to pick your brain. And obviously how it goes on this show is that we have our guests select the double feature for us, and from what I understand, you've brought on some pretty formative movies in terms of your sort of budding cinephile days that, having watched them now, feel very much of a piece with your interest in music and in painting, and especially in the specific subject, I think, of hypnotic, dreamlike kind of quality, surrealism. So what are the 2 films that we're talking about this week, Charles, and why have you paired them together?
Well, I think initially you posed the question about movies that were influential to me. So,
yes.
And these are always on my sort of short list for that. One is The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. And that's a movie that came out in 1953 director Roy Rowland, but most importantly, the screenplay is by Dr. Suess, and the songs and lyrics are by Dr. Suess. And the set design, whoever actually is credited with it, are Dr. Suess sets. And it's just such a nutty film. And my personal story with it is that I saw it first when I think I was 10, visiting my grandmother. And, we would spend the day watching soap operas and whatever she was kind of watching. And then I think she kind of left me alone to watch this movie that was, broadcast. This would be back a long time ago when things had to be broadcast. And, but then I kind of forgot about the movie. But certain potent images remained with me, but in a kind of dreamlike space. And then years later at college, Syracuse University, it was screening somewhere and I went to go see it. And it just came back to me like, oh my God, this wasn't a dream. This actually, and particularly the image of the two.
You had the experience of little Bart with it.
The experience, the two guys skating they had one beard between them as a kind of U shape as they're skating. That was the image that just was so weird and really stuck with me. But also in the movie, there's a lot of monitors and televisions within the space and all those things. Certainly in retrospect, feel really influential to say Twisted Issues and so on, the idea of monitors within the frame. And then later in my life, I saw the movie The Incredibly Strange Creatures Who Stopped Living and Became Mixed Up Zombies. And that's directed by Ray Dennis Steckler.
I think one of the longest titles someone's brought on our show, by the way.
It is a long title. It is a long title.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to post this.
That's a good question. But I was turned on to that film via the extremely influential book, The Incredibly Strange Films, which Research put out, and Jim Morton, Boyd Rice, and I forget who else were sort of the authors of that anthology of encyclopedia of strange film. And if you aren't familiar with that book or the whole series that Research did, it was a San Francisco-based publisher. You should definitely check that out. But that movie had such a huge influence.
They briefly
on
turned it
me,
into a little bit of a show too, right? I feel like where they were interviewing some of the filmmakers that they covered and stuff. I feel like I've seen some episodes of that.
I don't know if they are actually affiliated with these guys. I mean, I think I've seen Incredibly Strange Films, much like Michael Weldon's Psychotronic, initially Psychotronic Magazine, and then he had the Psychotronic Encyclopedia, 2 volumes. The word psychotronic became sort of used. I feel like Incredibly Strange Film might be a similar situation, but I don't know. I know Jim personally, Jim Morton, and I don't know about him doing any kind of podcast with that name. And the thing is, obviously the name comes from the Ray Dennis Steckler film, Incredibly Strange Creatures, I think. But that's a great book, by the way. I recommend it to anyone. Incredibly Strange Films. It covers Al Adamson, Ray Dennis Steckler. I should have it with me to really do it justice, but it kind of had a huge influence on me. At the time, I was singing in a punk band in Gainesville, Florida, and my father's camcorder came into my hands, and so I suddenly had this instrument that at the time was not a common thing to have, and it was an RCA VHS camcorder. You held it on your shoulder. It was pretty heavy, but it was an all-in-one thing. So between reading Incredibly Strange Films and then having this camcorder at hand to start recording the bands in Gainesville, Florida, which Gainesville, Florida still has an incredibly vibrant scene. And I've often compared it to Gainesville, Florida is to Florida what, say, Austin is to Texas, or Ann Arbor is to Michigan, in terms of this sort of oasis of culture and music and, its own thing. And in the case of Austin, of course, it got well beyond its own thing. But and Gainesville had its place in the sun too, in the '90s and stuff. And I think there's something called Fest there. I left in the late '80s, so I kind of left before it caught on for Gainesville. But at the time, it just seemed so important. Because you'd see this great show, and also the shows there were all house parties. So, that was the main. There were legitimate venues and stuff like that, but where it really was happening, as far as just like the energy and stuff, were the house parties. And you'd go to a show at a house party, and this band would just kick ass. And and it's Gainesville, so it's Florida, so it's humid, and it's just like all these sweating bodies in a room, and then the show would end. And you'd sort of hear the last echoes of the speakers, and and people loading up, and it would just be this sort of like the wind kind of sucked out of the room. The music was over, and I would just look around, going, "Fuck!" Like no one is documenting this. Like what we have this memory, it's wonderful, and so that's kind of what motivated me initially to I want to start recording this stuff. Mm-hmm. So there was that aspect to it, and in my head, I had this idea. Well, this could go towards something like a documentary, something, and that's kind of how I've approached a lot of my stuff, and I still do. Is I just feel like I'm gathering images, if it's just pure imagery, but in this case, images and sound. But even now, still, I'm just. Which
is how we kind of heard that Ray Dennis Steckler kind of worked too, right? That was his deal. That he would just shoot and shoot and shoot, and he just saw things around him, and he just kind of improvised images of him and his friends into, eventually a kind of finished movie.
I don't know that my scholarship of actually Ray Dennis Steckler isn't that great beyond this movie. And I did watch, this time I watched the movie with a commentary track. Okay. So it was Ray Dennis Steckler talking. And then the second commentary track was Joe Bob Briggs talking. Mm. And Joe Bob Briggs actually had seemed to have more of the dirt and the fun minutia and stuff. But truthfully, I didn't know that. But it makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. It makes sense to me that Steckler worked that way. But in terms of coming up with Twisted Issues, the urge to make this documentary, then sort of because I read Incredibly Strange Films, I think. I don't know this. I do know the story, actually. I proposed to there was a place at the University of Florida in Gainesville called the Plaza of the Americas. I think most colleges or universities have something called the Quad or something like that, where basically people hang out. And that's where, the punks hung out, because there was among other reasons, because there was the Hare Krishnas had free food there every lunchtime, and the local Hare Krishna community. So it was just, believe me, it was just a scene. And I just was hanging out with some folks there, and I just said, I'm making a movie. If you can come up with a part for yourself in it and a story that goes along with your part, you can be in the movie. And I kind of really, it was sort of an open call. And I didn't necessarily know some of these people that well. And some of these people, there might have been some animosity, even just because local incestuous scenes sometimes have that sort of thing. And plus I was a singer in a band that, whatever, you get accused of being a poser, or there's a whole lot of stuff that goes along. And it was, for me, it was kind of like and I also knew that I wanted to leave Gainesville at some point. Like I knew that I wasn't gonna, and there was, there's kind of a perception of, abandoning the scene and this kind of stuff. But I knew I wanted to move to New York. I had been wanting to move to New York for some time. I'd gone to school in Syracuse. Most of my peers, or many of my peers, moved to New York right afterwards. That's what one did. I was in art school. Everybody, that was kind of what one did. They moved to New York afterwards. The part that I had left out or whatever is that I didn't really, or hadn't figured on, is I couldn't afford to move to New York. So I just moved back to Florida, lived with my parents for a while, stuff like that. Anyway, but the point is the story kind of emerged from these shared contributions. And then, but because of Incredibly Strange Films and to get back on track, this singular movie, Incredibly Strange Creatures, I wanted to make a film that had splatter. And I composed all the shots for my 12-inch Sony, which is in the movie, Twisted Issues, to have as much what I called BSI. And a friend of mine was like, blood saturation index? And I said, no, blood per square inch. Because I just because as a painter, I just felt like, red's a powerful color. And on this 12-inch screen, I just wanted however much of it to work within that composition. And I mean, it definitely works large too, but I definitely wanted it to work on a 12-inch screen. So that's kind of how that went. And then anyway, when I watched Incredibly Strange Creatures, there's a scene with Cash Flagg, who is Ray Dennis Steckler, but the protagonist, and his buddy, played by Atlas King, who has a Spanish accent, Mexican accent, I guess. And he's talking about, getting a job. He's like, getting a job.
Come on, man.
I don't know if I connected it at the time, but certainly this last time I watched it, it connects beautifully with in Return of the Living Dead, when the kids are walking along, the punks, and, well, where's such and so tonight? He's got a job. He got a job? That dick. And it's a perfect mirror of that moment. And certainly at where I was coming from, he just spoke to me, Cash Flagg, at that moment. And he's got a little doll in his hand, and work just makes me depressed. And the doll, he tilts the doll's head down. And so that was I feel like those were fulcral source moments for me as far as turning this document of video and of bands into something that had a narrative. Mm-hmm. And that's, and playing on the trope of the Jason or whatever, putting on a mask and so on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, that's as great as any intro as we're going to get. So we're going to jump right into it here. We're going to kick things off, and we're going to go chronologically. So we're going to start with, let's go back to Charles's early days, 10-year-old Charles with the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T.
From the sky-high ladder. See the whammy duel between Dr. T and Mr. Z. See the eighth wonder of the cinema world, the startling, daring Wonderama in color by Technicolor.
All right, we are talking the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, the 1953 American fantasy musical directed by Rowland, produced by Stanley Kramer, written by Theodore Suess Geisel, a.k.a. Dr. Seuss, and starring real world song and dance couple Peter Lind Hayes and Mary Healy, Captain Hook himself, Hans Conried, and a little boy named Tommy Reddig as Bart Collins, a little boy whose widowed mother forces him to take piano lessons from the cruel and tyrannical Mr. Dr. T, and escapes into a bit of a fantasy dream world in order to deal with that, in order to kind of overcome that. This is our first time ever talking about the former advertising man turned children's author, Dr. Seuss, on the show, mostly because this is the only original script that he ever wrote that got made and bombed, and he ran away from movies. It really affected the relationship with movies and making movies, and anything else was essentially an adaptation of one of his children's picture books, which actually came out after this movie, many of them. Anyway, many of the very famous ones that people are familiar with that have all the clever rhyming poetry and very imaginative illustrations that he did himself. Obviously, movie versions include Chuck Jones's now very iconic take on The Grinch Who Stole Christmas with Boris Karloff, or I don't know, maybe the Mike Myers Cat in the Hat, if anyone out there really loves Oscar-winning cinematographer Emmanuel Lubezki, since he shot that movie.
That movie is like a bad LSD trip. It is wild, honestly.
It's pretty horrifying in some interesting ways, because Dr. Seuss had some incredible design. I mean, anyone who hears the term Green Eggs and Ham or Horton Hears a Who, you will immediately conjure up all kinds of elaborate architecture and ridiculous machinery and all the vivid watercolors and kind of rounded character designs that he loved. He's a very, very notable illustrator, as well as obviously an author. And prior to publishing all of these books that would, that people would become very familiar with from roughly like 1954 into the 60s and a little bit into the 70s, before doing that, he had gotten involved in this movie due to the fact that he took a break, I guess, from trying to pursue making books due to World War II and in trying to sort of support the U.S. war effort. And he became involved in drawing posters and making short films that led him to receiving an Oscar for the best animated short for a short called Gerland McBoing Boing, about a little boy who speaks in sound effects instead of words, was the concept. And the short film got a lot of acclaim, and it put him on the radar of Columbia Pictures and Stanley Kramer, who had heard his pitch for a big studio fantasy musical that could compete with the likes of Disney. And they hired the MGM studio journeyman, Mr. Rowland, who had made everything from comedies to noirs to adventure films. He had worked with Barbara Stanwyck, Edward G. Robinson, Janet Leigh, Debbie Reynolds, some really big names. And also, I read at one point, eloped with Louis B. Mayer's niece and was blacklisted temporarily until she argued for him to come back to MGM. And so he ended up getting some work there. But either way, the result is... Oh,
any
go ahead.
of his movies? Because
this is my first one.
Now. Okay, yeah.
This is my first one. I'm going to have to go down the rabbit hole and see if there's anything else like this. I have a feeling he gets a pretty big assist from the imagination of Dr. Seuss on that one. That maybe the set design is maybe not entirely a directorial choice as much as this is just what made sense for the material and for a journeyman to realize. But the result, oh my God. I did not know that there was a Dr. Seuss musical that existed. So thanks to Charles for showing this to us. But this is a full-on, like for anyone who hasn't seen it, similarly to Wizard of Oz, this is centered essentially around the subjective anxieties of a child who, there's various real-life characters in his life, a strict piano teacher, his mother, and this sort of kindly plumber character who all become these exaggerated characters in this larger sort of dream or nightmare world, however you want to describe it, where the piano teacher essentially becomes this authoritarian leader of this giant palace where, he is going to rule over all of the piano playing fingers of 500 children. And he's going to marry, the mother and hypnotize her and do all of these things. And it is realized in just this completely aesthetically delirious and kind of expressive fashion with just so many weird shapes and colors and textures, so much ambitious, like fanciful analog craft that's going on. I mean, the movies I was thinking about was like Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes was something that I was thinking about. Willy Wonka, especially the more sort of demented and kind of violent aspects that would eventually appear in both Roald Dahl's source and the eventual film that they would make. And it's a gorgeous movie and an insane movie.
Yeah, the specifically that very beginning, I mean, it just opens up already in the kind of surreal dream world. And the thing that threw me off right away, but in a very good way, I was just intrigued by it, was knowing it was a Dr. Seuss film, but right away there's kind of darkness involved with it at the very beginning. Like the world that he's in this kind of like dark room with just gray and black spheres all around him, and these men with colorful nets, like that's the only color that's really coming out at first, are trying to capture the kid as he runs around. So there was just this like,
there's like a giant guy who's just darkness. A spotlight trying to catch him, and fog machines and
yeah. And still though, they're doing like a big orchestral piece, and you know, they're doing some really cool choreography that's very synchronized and everything. It's just I guess I wasn't expecting so much darkness in a Dr. Seuss production, and that was very cool. It's like the color is trying to burst out rather than what I'm used to, where it's just always there. It's always on the page.
For sure. Well, and we'll get into it too, but this is one of those things where, for some reason, I don't know, Stanley Kramer, I don't know, maybe he was going on a wild trip or something, but they did let him write like what sounds like it might have even been like a 3-hour musical. Half the songs that he wrote for this thing are missing from the final film because there was a preview cut of this film that was very dark and very deranged. It did not land with children. It did not land with adults that they showed it to. Apparently, the post-war themes that were appearing in it, because it was right after World War II, and some of the atomic anxiety and some of the anti-authoritarian and sort of anti-Nazi themes he was trying to fit into it, ended up just kind of disturbing people. And so what we're going to be talking about today is the 90-minute version where Kramer reshot a beginning and ending for the movie and kept as many of the sequences as made sense to keep. And to package it as a sentimental kind of family friendly film. And part of the beauty, I think, of this film is that it's so odd in conception that a lot of those creepy details and bizarre details still make their way into the movie, despite the fact that it is packaged as an MGM, bring your kids, have a nice afternoon kind of film. But Charles, you already kind of talked to us a little bit about, like, you kind of watched it the first time as a kid, and it ended up kind of being sort of exercised out of you almost when you were in college. But you obviously recently rewatched it for the show. So what was your impression watching it now, decades later? Is it still haunting?
Yes, but I have to say I've seen it a few times since. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I mean, it's something I got the Blu-ray. I found the Blu-ray for like $5 somewhere. No extras, nothing. But it's it's a gorgeous thing to watch. And so I've seen it maybe 2 or 3 times since college. It's not right up there with Phantom of the Paradise, but it's sort of. I've definitely watched Phantom of the Paradise more times. Not to get onto that subject, but I mean, I feel some kinship to that. That movie. I mean, doesn't occupy, because it doesn't go back as far for me, but that's another great film.
Yeah, we love that.
Well, I don't know if you guys Futurama fans.
Yeah, of course.
Futurama when it was around. Well, did you recognize any of? There's a Futurama episode where Bender goes to robot hell.
Okay.
The episode is basically he comes across a proselytizing robot preacher, and he's briefly seized with the spirit, as it were, and he's given this essentially this sort of mark, this implant that goes into him, but it's also a contract. And so like once he gives up on the religion, the robot religion, and he tears out that thing that was placed on him or in him, and he throws it into the ground, and then it sort of sends a message to robot hell to come get him. And there's a whole scene where they're going down the elevator, much like they do in and even the robot devil down in robot hell sounds like, who are you to call me what crazy? It sounds like Hans Conried. And so that's a marvelous connection and allusion, and unsurprising that it would be there, just because those guys are geniuses too. So that I really noticed, because I guess I hadn't seen 5,000 Fingers. Gosh, I wish I could get a copy of 5,000 Fingers. At that point, I couldn't. But I noticed that, and I guess I didn't really. I watched a lot of noir. Since then, I feel like I'm more informed by noir and the post-war fears. And I remember a Twilight Zone where someone was saying, well, Dad, I mean, you have your fears, but we have the bomb to be afraid of. And so I don't think I really remembered or just thought about how centered the is that atomic?
Yes.
I don't know any of the backstory. Are you saying they filmed the wraparound?
Yeah, so it sounds like Stanley Kramer was brought in to film the kind of family-friendly wraparound of the actual relationship with the plumber and the piano teacher. It sounds like in the original version, the piano teacher wasn't actually there wasn't a real-world analog for him. I guess it was just the name of the kid's like piano book that he had, and so he imagined it kind of further from there. And so to make it more directly similar to something like The Wizard of Oz, that was Stanley Kramer's decision when they were trying to trim it down and make it coherent, because otherwise there were all of these dark things that they had to cut out. And I don't know exactly what some of them are or what all of them are. There are a couple details that are known, that like Dr. T was like lopping henchmen's heads off who were then performing slapstick duties without their heads on. There was some more sexualized elements, I think, with caging the mother. There were definitely some more things to do with like direct references to, like gas chambers and things to do with the Nazis and the dungeons. And there was a lot of very specific post-war anger at the rise of the Nazis that was put into the movie. And apparently no one knows if the original version exists in any kind of capacity in the Kramer vaults or something. And so what we're watching, but it's just funny to think about the fact that, those details are, there are some that still make it in here despite the fact that they tried to package it into something else. And normally that would be something that maybe bothers me or sits with me. And I kind of go, man, I can tell that they just shaved all the edges off of it. But there's something about the fact that it still kind of manages to work as the plain family MGM musical. Part of it obviously is the technical craft of that era. Like just this is one of the last Technicolor films. This is shot by the cinematographer named Franz Planer, who had just shot Roman Holiday for William Wyler, and 1 year later would shoot Richard Fleischer's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea for Disney, which was like their first foray into big budget Technicolor kind of CinemaScope, and just drop dead gorgeous in terms of like the boat production design, the underwater marine action. Like if you want to see Kirk Douglas in a little sailor outfit, just getting drunk, singing songs, hanging out with a seal, you will not get a more gorgeously filmed version of something like that. And even the music, who was working with Dr. Seuss here, is Friedrich Hollander, who ended up getting Oscar nominated for it and had done music for Billy Wilder and Joseph von Sternberg. And like, so there's a lot of very handsome technical Hollywood qualities that were kind of gifted to the production from Stanley Kramer. And it sounded like Stanley Kramer maybe regretted not overseeing the scripting process a little bit more than he did. And Dr. Seuss ended up getting away with a lot more things than he should have. And I think that's kind of ends up being part of what made this really work for me, because Jamie's right. Like, even when it opens, because I don't know if they could figure out a way that they were like, that we have to go back to the real world where we hang out with Bart and we meet his mother and we meet Dr. Terwilliger, the piano instructor, and all of this. But they were like, we have to introduce the fact that that's not what this movie is really going to be. So we need to show you the giant dream world kind of first, and guys chasing him around in onesies and spotlights trying to catch him, and then kind of pulling back and being like, here's a kid having a nightmare at his piano where he is receiving lessons from this Dr. T, played by Hans Conried, who's very mean and strict and kind of berates him for daydreaming instead of practicing, because practicing makes perfect. And we find out that he's been hired by his widowed single mother, Mary Healy, who he loves, but doesn't share her passion for the piano, and also thinks that she might be being hypnotized by Dr. T and the various songs that he plays, where you do start to get the Dr. Seuss wordplay even in the songs with the 10 happy little fingers. Now, isn't that just fine? Not 3, not 7, not 9, 10 dancing straight in a line, and all of them are mine. It's like a little tongue twister to say this kind of stuff. And I like how when it's first performed by the mother and the son, it's a cute little moment between them. And when it's replayed later in the dream, it's like, and now those fingers are mine. It's designed to be kind of repurposed in a kind of clever way like that. But yeah, you noticed right away, I think, all the rhythms and repetitions and the great sort of sense of music. And it's very quickly after that it is kind of immediately drops him into the hypnotic dream world where all of the things that the piano instructor is strict about, like having control over this little child, wanting to kind of get involved with the mother, and also only liking the piano is one of the key elements of this too. The idea of someone playing the scratchy violins or the screechy piccolos or the nauseating trumpets very much pisses him off, which is what we'll talk about when we get to the dungeon section. But so there's kind of like a family friendly, sort of entry point to the movie, but it's really, really short. And then they are like, we are dropping you into, where this kid's subjective anxieties are about to become this kind of playful allegory about his feelings about the adults around him, and maybe how they don't listen to him, or how they maybe have their own sort of nefarious internal things going on that are about to become external, very, very external.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And
I found that I found that again, I didn't know that these were added on scenes. I mean, I just found that the kind of, she's making a cake or, whatever. She's got a mixing bowl, and then, the phone rings. Oh, hi, Betty. And I found those to be such awesome counterpoints to the, to this menace within the world that the evil Terwilliger lives in. I mean, I thought that it really made them even darker. You know what I mean? Because you had the contrast of this almost cartoonishly, Leave It to Beaver kind of, hi, Mom.
As this perfect nuclear family, suburban kind of existence.
Yeah, which, was its own kind of thing. But regarding like lyrics, I did jot down, this is one of my favorite sort of sequences, so come on and dress me in the blossoms of 1,000,000 pink trees. Come on and dress me up in liverwurst and camembert cheese. Come on and dress me up in pretzels, dress me up in Bock beer suds, 'cause I'm going do-me doing in my do duds.
That's so good.
I mean, that whole sequence with him getting dressed
it's ridiculous. It's amazing.
I also like. I almost forgot about this, but they have him look directly at the audience and kind of explain his scenario before everything really begins.
Also true.
He does mention his father dying, I believe, and I'm not sure if he says anything specifically, but I thought that might imply the war But
that's what I assumed.
That's a really
too.
good point. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, that makes sense. And then the plumber, the plumber just a good solid Polish name. I mean, he just sounds sounds like a good American in the sense of our immigrant heritage and so on.
Totally.
He has him throughout is great with I'm forgetting the child's name here for some reason.
Bartholomew Collins.
Yes, that's right. But he has multiple great moments with him where they really connect, and he kind of becomes like a father figure to him. But I think it's my favorite song on the whole thing. It's that Dream Stuff, that little duet that they do together.
Oh yeah,
I thought was really great. Honestly, I don't know if it's in the same key or they use the same, just similar notes, but it kind of reminded me of the Willy Wonka song, if you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. There's something in there. I can't quite remember how they sing Dream Stuff, but it kept going into my head. So I was wondering if maybe that inspired it later on in that soundtrack. But yeah, it's really great.
That would not surprise me because definitely. And then there's that movie that Danny Elfman's brother did.
Oh yeah, what was that called?
Because I feel like, especially during the dungeon scene, which I guess you're going to talk about at some point, with all the instruments and stuff. I mean, that was pure Richard Elfman to me. But it just shows that the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T had an influence.
Forbidden Zone, is that the movie that you're thinking of?
Forbidden Zone, yes, exactly. And that's just, you just can't not see, can't unsee the 5,000 Fingers. And I posted on my Facebook a still from the going down the elevator scene. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Second floor men's room or whatever. Yeah, I can't remember, but great.
Incredible.
As they're descending into the depths of hell, the dungeon. And my goodness, the number of comments I got of people who were marked or marred or who love that film. I mean, it's definitely it definitely there are a lot of people out there who are aware of it. Or
I mean, as someone watching it for the first time, I was surprised at how many people I knew who were familiar with it, and kind of how big this has become. Obviously, since it was a really, really big failure for Kramer and for Dr. Seuss and for everyone, but. No, I think it is lived on specifically due to how strange and kind of vivid it is. I think anyone who watches this won't forget it and will probably tell someone about it. So it's had a little bit of that, I think, word of mouth experience of people just being like, dude, Dr. Seuss did a musical, and it was for some reason given as much money as an MGM musical, and they clearly did not give the script oversight when they shot it, because he just filled it with tons of crazy detail that absolutely made its way into the movie. How overtly authoritarian the Dr. T character is, as this dictator conducting from his castle wall in these huge purple drape looking robes, and the way that the set sort of extends his kind of power and control. I think about one of the first times we see Bart in the dream with him, how massive that piano keyboard set is. It's twirling like a never-ending bar counter, where he is declaring that we are going to celebrate the grand opening of the Terwilliger Institute, his Happy Little Finger Institute, where he is going to have 500 little boys pulled up in buses, and he's going to have full control over their 5,000 little fingers. They're all going to be his. They're going to be practicing 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. It is funny how the movie operates on a very juvenile sort of child nightmare logic in that way. The worst thing that an adult could do is make all these kids play the piano 24 hours a day. But I just like how the movie, due to how it was made, it takes that very seriously, and those anxieties do become, extensions in the set. outsized that child's nightmare becomes reality that the little, child actor has to interact with is incredible. The sets, the lopsided sort of like never-ending staircases, the giant hands and heads that are talking to him, the electrified barbed wire fencing, or those like massive window bars and matte paintings, and these cells that the kids are being kept in, and his mother obviously becoming this sort of like otherworld secretary and answering the phone for this institution. And the worst idea is that, he can see that something's so clearly wrong, but his mother, can't. And it's very frustrating and very scary for him. But also because it's Dr. Seuss, it's very funny. Like, I love when the mother answers the phone and she's just like, "No, madam, most definitely your son will not be allowed to bring his baseball. Dr. Terwilliger does not believe in baseballs, golf balls, basketballs, or tennis balls, or ping pong balls." There's so many. And Dr. Terwilliger only believes in the piano. And it's just, it's so ridiculous, but it's funny that due to the way that the movie is made, I guess, like, it really does take this kid's anxiety. It makes them creepy. It makes them sort of off-putting that a character could have this much power over a kid. And it reminded me of some of the sort of kid thrillers we've talked about on the show. Something like, Jamie, what's that one about the kid who cries wolf? And it's like a Hitchcock thing. Do you remember the one I'm talking about? And
The Window?
The Window, is that what it was?
I think it's called The Window.
There's a similar, I think it was shot by Hitchcock's cinematographer, and there was something about that movie where the terror of a child just not having control over their life and being at the whims of the adults, especially even when the adults are being so obviously nefarious in this way. And I think you feel that stress with this kid in the way that it's designed.
Yeah, the very first thing that you see, of course, is that just oppressive image of the conductor standing over him. He's on this giant piano, and at first you don't know what his plan is. You don't know that 500 other kids are going to be at this thing. There's the seat, so it's implied, but right now you're just seeing Bart there alone. So it almost feels like it's an individual torture for him or something like that.
Right.
And he ends up doing just speaking on Tommy Rettig. It could have been the child laws in the 50s that resulted in this, but he does end up doing a couple stunts that I thought were decent. One particular is when he's on like a pretty tall part in the dungeon, and he has to climb into the open hole that's at the top of it, and he's up there
I
like
thought
a
the
good
same
20
thing.
feet. I was like, holy shit, this kid's just
like,
freeballing here.
I mean, I was imagining that, yes, of course, there was a mattress and a bunch of adults down there. Okay, but I just can't imagine them doing that today, letting a kid.
No, even that bit when he has to climb that ladder, and like that just never ending ladder into the sky. And, eventually they're going to do this wacky thing where he pulls his shirt out and he's able to use it almost like a parachute and kind of glide around a little bit. Right. But there was just something about even those massive images of seeing this kid being chased and having to climb that ladder, where it's like, you're getting a little bit of child endangerment thriller elements out of this, while also, that works for a movie that is partially about, this scary world of a kid's experience and his view of the adults in his life. I mean, he has one song that's very much about this that actually reminded me of kind of the way that Roald Dahl would also, communicate his children's war against adults in a couple of his children's books. But the song that Bart gets, his main song, which is Because We're Kids, and he talks about how, because we're small, because we're close to the ground, because you have this inherent power over us, doesn't mean that you have the right to push us and kind of shove us around and dictate everything that we do. And there's definitely some of that anxiety that he feels. And part of I think what the movie, eventually has to do is that the two adults in his life have to realize that the piano teacher is a crazy authoritarian figure, and they have to help him actually escape this world. But it takes a lot of convincing, I will say, for his buddy, the local handsome plumber, played by Peter Lind Hayes, to kind of figure that out. Even though I think even in the first opening sequence, he's the one who's like, yeah, that piano teacher kind of seems like a bit of a racketeer to me. But who am I to disagree with a mother if this is what she wants to do with her kid? And it's funny that Bart there's a little bit of anxiety with Bart kind of wants him to be his father figure because he has a little bit more of that sort of traditionally masculine, he fixes things around the house versus the very, as we'll see in the dream world, the very flamboyantly coded Dr. T and his crazy outfits and his crazy line deliveries. I mean, Hans Conried absolutely goes for it in terms of
it's so theatrical.
some of the line deliveries and the musical note like outfit that he has on at one point. And even the pageantry of his performance and his outfits is spectacular.
And even his room design and everything, like he's got all these secret compartments that make no sense. It's like you'd have to almost know that the couch was going to be there for that thing to come out of the floor at that moment. It's like it feels like it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's still
also
it's
everything
still cool.
is oversized even for him. Like even his desk and his bed, everything. Like it's funny that like he's just like he's almost like he's compensating is how the kid kind of feels about it. He's like, look at these giant things that absolutely do not work for him. But there's also so much ridiculous, obviously, sort of cartoon logic to the movie as a result of this experience that the kid is having. Where, I mean, one of my favorites is the fact that the plumber in his dream, he doesn't become anything else. He's still the plumber, but he has to install 500 sinks for all of the 500 children to meet the sanitary code because they still have code like building codes in this like dream universe that the contractor needs to be aware of.
Sink inspector.
Yes. And that's also why Dr. T can't annihilate or disintegrate him. He's like, we have to wait until he installs all 500 sinks first.
Yeah, and it's so funny just to think about like, there's an inspector there, but there's not an inspector for the like 5-story pole that leads to every single level that seems kind of unsafe as well. All the logic is so fun and childish, but then still has a darkness to it because we're dealing with his fear. Like there's one great moment where we get into the kind of the dungeon torture aspect, and this one guy, you just hear this constant drumming, and it's a bass drummer that just wasn't doing the proper rhythm, and at first you just think he's forced to hit the drum all day long, and that would be torturous enough, and then they cut to a shadow and the guy's just pounding on the inside going, let me out, so you realize that he's just going through noise torture 24/7.
Yeah, Dr. T's even like, they're asking him, you're like, you mean you punished this man and he just has to beat that drum forever? And he's like, oh, that isn't the man I'm punishing. My man is inside the drum.
Oh my god. It's and just like obviously because it's oversized, it still has this cartoonish quality to it. There's a humor to it, but when you really sit down and analyze that is torturous. That's truly just nightmare fuel right there. There's some other examples of the dungeon and torture as well, but that one just really stood out to me.
Well, regarding truly horrific things that I think children relate to or whatever. When I think of the 5,000 Fingers, I think they thought they were making The Wizard of Oz. Yeah. They thought they were going to make something that, would be an eternal child's classic or whatever. And in the sense that The Wizard of Oz, when I was a kid, it was a yearly thing that that showed on TV. And it was around Christmas, or it just felt like Christmas. Oh, The Wizard of Oz! Oh my God, and I just remember gathering around the. Oh my, we've seen it before and all that.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I just rewatched it in a theater, and there were tons of like people taking their young kids to see it for the first time there. So we got to hear it. Like that movie still works for young children. They were reacting, they were laughing, they were still scared of certain elements. It was the first time I noticed that the Tin Man pulls out a gun at one point. I had completely memory hold that part of the movie.
Wow. I don't remember that. But like the flying monkeys, genuinely terrifying.
Yes.
Genuinely. I mean, as for a kid, that to me was as a kid one of those nightmare things. And then the fact that they tore apart the scarecrow.
Yeah.
Well, that's they took my legs and they put them over there and they. Well, that's you all over. But that's terrifying. The idea of just being disembodied. Yeah. And I do think that in that sense, the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T definitely did that. It has that kind of, terrifying stuff. And for me personally, the mom thing, the idea of your mom being a traitor to you, because before that experience at 10 years old. I feel like I had an experience more like, say, 5 years old or 7 years old or something, a dream. And it was sort of a Twilight Zone palette, like a black and white dream. And Twilight Zone would have been on the air when I was a kid, definitely something we watched as a family, which kind of astonishes me in a way. But this one dream I had was my mother was an executioner, and there was a guillotine. And first, my dad was his head was cut off. Then my younger brother, his head was cut off, and I'm going, Mom, not me. And mom looks down at me, and, and then I wake up, whatever. But just watching the 5,000 Fingers, just last night or whatever, I got the same that same kind of sense of like, just you can't trust your own mother. I mean, it just that's a profound, I think, a kind of child thing. I mean,
yeah.
My God.
His kind of like his looking at it at like he knows what's wrong, and he has really no power to fix it in any way. Like he knows that Dr. T's powers or hypnotization or whatever is kind of the root of it all, especially once he starts to see there's a moment where the plumber confronts him as well in the dream, and then they have this cool little dance number where he's controlling him, it seems. But then after
they do like a dance gesture fight that's part of the hypnotizing thing where he's like, I'm gonna put the whammy on him, and
they're throwing the whammy, throw it back, throw it. Yeah, that was.
it's like a little wizard battle or something with no effects added.
And then the kid overhearing him say after the plumber's like, okay, he's probably not that bad of a guy, whatever. He hears him saying that he's going to disintegrate him incredibly slowly. Because he's gone against him or whatever, and so it's just he's like constantly the kid always knows what he's dealing with. He knows that this person's evil and oppressive and whatever and controlling his mother, and I think that's part of the fear is just not being able to fix it, knowing full well what's going on.
Even though the kid knows to ask the correct questions too when he's finding out how the plumber is getting paid. When he's like, I'm getting paid in pastulas, which then is getting, there's an exchange rate with crotch mucks. And he's like, well, what is that in US dollars? And he finds out he's getting paid about $20 to install 500 sinks.
Right.
There's so much of like the kid just trying to expose the pure ridiculousness of this adult plot, and that the adults are just too, hypnotized or too unwilling to, accept the fact that a child might have knowledge or understanding or see something that they don't, that the kid is obviously dealing with in these very exaggerated and goofy and fun ways that, eventually do become a little bit more, scary when it's like, you're having fun watching the plumber and Dr. T get into this weird, sort of like dance battle that they're getting into. And then he's serving him up his like this giant cigar and sort of like alcohol sort of displayer that pops out of the floor. Yeah. And, but there's something so creepy about he hypnotizes the plumber back to his side, and he's immediately like, well, that's the end of that. Even though we just had our dream stuff song where we were connecting and, we were fake fishing together for bass. And, this guy would be such a great dad to me, but he still can't protect me from this guy. I need to help them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. And I think this is when he starts to kind of do some resistance, I guess. Like I know there's that great moment where he's running around the kind of, the castle or whatever. And he sees this riser of it, like this door rising, and he knows that the guards are coming. So, they show that it rises, the guards are there, and then you're like, where did the kid go? And he ended up like sitting on this little, I don't know, this ornament that was above the door. And so he's kind of sitting on it as it goes down, and then sneaks into the doctor's room so that he can steal the key, find out what's in the safe, that kind of thing. And
which is a whole set piece involving the like satin drape bed and the gold like metronome that's dangling above him that he has to like, get his way into.
I love just this fun little puzzle moment where he's climbing the bed frame that looks very much like a Dr. Seuss designed bed frame. It's just all over the place with its shapes. And then he finds this, some type of hard material so that he can tap on the side of the metronome to keep it going, because the doctor sleeps on time, apparently. apparently. I just, all these little things that mix in with it's like the childhood wonder, the nightmare stuff, but also the kind of the imagination, like what you would need to do in order to get to find the solution to this problem. It's still kind of cartoonish in a way. I love all these examples leading up to him fighting back.
Yeah, and eventually sliding down that pole through all the very, sort of delirious rooms, trying to, like he is just basically trying to expose Dr. T's plot that, he's denying all of the rumors of stealing widowed women's money, and he's just trying to better the American youth through music. And I do like the plumber hitting him back at one point. You talk a lot, but I don't know how much you say, ultimately. The kid eventually, to expose this all the way down through the hellish dungeon into probably the most impressive sequence of the movie, the one that Charles has been alluding to, which is where, he makes his way down to the dungeon, and he at first sees all of the musicians who play anything but the piano performing this incredible absurdist ballet where it's all the violinists, it's all the sort of trumpeters, and they're in these like green paint skinned monster men essentially dancing, and they have like boxing gloves, and they have all of these, some of them their bodies are turning into like horn contraptions because of, I guess, how long they've been down there. They're literally like turning into their instruments, and there's massive full set instruments, like the giant stone xylophone, the giant full body harp, the swing drum. Like I was like just blown. The one guy who is like functionally turning into a tuba, and it's like wrapped around him like a snake. Some of the imagery in this I was just like absolutely floored by. That
was some of my favorites. Right. One of my other favorite designs was the mannequin cellos. That was very cool. And I also love my favorite part is the percussionists. There's like 3 or 4, it seems, and they each almost only have one moment where they hit something. And there's this one guy that waits for like 3/4 of the song, and his only job is to shoot a dart at a target that hits a bell. And it makes me lose my mind that that's his job, and he takes it so seriously.
And then he goes back to studying the music.
Yes, exactly.
Am I coming in again?
Exactly.
I also like the trapeze guy. Ting.
Oh yeah, on the swings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That was it.
There's some amazing moments, and it's just it's all. I love the way it's shot. I mean, I love the way the whole movie's shot with these musicals because they show the entire giant set so often, and then they also do some really creative stuff, like do some more close-ups for focused in moments and all of that. But it's just when you see all of those extras doing all this choreography on different elevations, and there's a giant harp in the middle of it, and they're all playing it, and I don't know, there's just something so incredible about it that I don't know if it's we talk about it all the time on the show, but with a lot of things now, you can kind of just tell that it's not a full set, and I just love seeing those just the material on screen. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I noticed. And I don't know why don't I notice this with most shows or whatever, but you can see the 4x8 plywood that you can see the seams of you definitely know you're looking at a set. There's and it's painted and stuff, but I'm just super aware of the materials. Like this isn't CGI. They actually built. And that piano thing alone is just like, wow.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because those keys moved. I noticed all the kids playing that, I don't expect they're actually making any noise in real life, but the keys actually do move. So they had to like lay in all these keyboards stuff. Yeah. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they don't move, but it's certainly, I'm convinced that they did.
And even once we get there too, it's like, again, the camera is moving throughout all of those extras, that entire giant castle floor, piano finale and everything. It's like there's one shot specifically that goes, I think, from one end to the other, and it's showing, the kids signing up, the kids getting all their things taken. It's unbelievable set to set what they end up doing just through with the camera work. It's amazing.
Well, and how many they have, like how many times that kid like goes through like a rounded arched doorway and ends up in, like another world where he's looking down at like these crazy like animal gargoyles and like these giant bridges where guys are chasing him, or how he gets his way into that dungeon the first time, which is just by a giant sliding pole through all of these various sets that they had to build. I mean, the office of Dr. T and how massive it is, his bedroom, even the way that they have to install carpet into that, and like the amount of production design energy that went into creating this expressionist nightmare for this child. It reminded me of something like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where it was just like there's a carnival quality to how this kid is experiencing this world. And then you start throwing in the musical elements and obviously some of the wordplay into it, and it just became something astonishing to every moment I'm looking or hearing something that I was like absolutely floored by, even if the sort of emotional simplicity or the narrative simplicity is maybe not something that you've not seen before. Again, it is very overtly Wizard of Oz, but does Wizard of Oz have a cross-eyed executioner doing his dum-da-dum song as they're going down? And Charles was talking about the first floor dungeon, and it's all the simple tortures and molten lead and all the things that he's talking about. But the second floor, it's all about ankle chains and neck chains and nooses and thumb screws, and and he's like, everybody get out now. But there was a third verse that was cut, and it is known what it is. And the third verse is: third floor dungeon, household appliances, spiked beds, electric chairs, gas chambers, roasting pots, and scalping devices.
Oh my god! Wow. Suess was going off, man.
Suess via Cormac McCarthy.
Yes.
And then later on, this is I think after that. This is because the plumber starts to believe him, and they kind of team up together, and they do
because he shows him. It's so funny too. He shows him the signed documentation of Dr. T's order to disintegrate him atom by atom at dawn, and the kid literally has to go, here, I have the paperwork. Like, do you believe me now? And I love that his response. The lesson he learns is we should always believe children. We should even believe their lies. And then does a Boy Scout like blood oath with him, which is like such a strange detail. I was like, what the hell?
It was crazy. It was like sign the contract with your blood, basically. It's the devil shit.
But one of the times I saw Dr. T was in the Film Forum in New York City, 89, 90, something like that. And, and people are there either who haven't seen it or who have seen it. I don't know. But there was an audible gasp in the audience for that scene when they pressed their thumbs together, because this was deep in the AIDS epidemic. And it was very, very personal for people that, I know people who passed away and, so on. And it was happening. And I just remember like the whole audience just like, because it just seems so wrong to, and then, just whatever homoerotic things about an older man. And that was interesting, because then I saw this when I just saw it recently. It didn't strike me as that bad. For one thing, it was a pinprick, and it just seemed like not that big of a deal. But nonetheless, in 1990 or whatever, it was like this.
That's interesting.
It almost kind of ruined the movie for, I think, some people, like the.
Yeah, and then
we were responsible.
It kind of goes into like again, it kind of goes into the child logic with it, because now as soon as they do that, he just goes, "All right, that makes you my old man. I guess you're my dad now.
You're my dad now. Yeah,
your wife."
Right. We're connected by blood.
Yeah.
Yes. Well,
now we're gonna go free my mother from the lock me tight, which is what they call it, which is what her cell is called, so that she doesn't have any romantic liaisons with the plumber, because neither both Dr. T and the kid are both very controlling of the mother in a way, but are also like none of that mushy romance stuff. That's not what this day is about.
Yeah.
That was a chastity lock that he cuts through with the flames.
It was.
That seemed legit. Yeah. The flame was going.
It actually looked like a chastity belt when you if you've ever seen a photo of a chastity belt back in the The old days. Now, I wanted to mention that the guards, the guards were such hyper masculine, hairy, dirty guys, and then they're yellow, they're giant yellow holsters. Were made of cloth for their pistols and stuff. They look like jock straps to me. I mean, so it was just
they do sing about how like stinky they are too. There's something very funny about them, and also how they're also anti-intellectual, which I think was meant to be part of the anti-authoritarian element too. Because when they eventually get their big song about how victorious they are and how gruesome and cruel and evil and rough and ugly, and they're men, but also we got poison ivy walls. We don't have like the hallowed halls of an Ivy League school were poison ivy, poo on Harvard and Yale. It's very funny. We have the best school now. Yeah, I also like that they don't say academy. They call it academy, and they call it alma mater. Never ever could be greater, rotten as a bad tomato.
Wow.
The lyrics are, they are very absurd and very well thought. I would love to see what some of these full songs were and how they may be connected to some of those other elements. But even as is, there's a lot of interesting sort of child anxiety going on between his mother versus, and the kind of men that he wants as a father, and the types of men who are trying to take psychological control of children. There's something interesting about that, which is, I guess, also where the bearded Siamese twins supposedly came from, because there's one sequence in here where the plumber has to roller skate fight powered by almost like Popeye style with the spinach. He's powered by pickle juice, and he roller skate fights these bearded Siamese twins on roller skates. And I guess this is an invention from Suess's World War II political cartoon days, where he explicitly tied a sort of Nazi brother by the beard to another brother that was meant to represent the Americans who didn't want to intervene against Hitler. And that's what the original political drawing was that these two guys are idiots who are going to crash into each other on roller skates in their beard. And so the plumber has to fight these guys and ends up making their way through, and it's a ridiculous like little dance sequence where it's almost just nearly chopping their heads off with the beard and stuff.
Once he cuts the beard, they lose. It's like a form of castration or whatever. They or Samson's hair or whatever. They cut the beard and they diminish. But regarding the bearding guys, and just in terms of art direction and just what goes into making a movie that's has this kind of resonance. When the kid wakes up and the sort of final scene, he's at the piano and interacting with his mom and the plumber. Behind him on the wall is a photo of a man with a beard and with a hat, and it is one half of that bearded dyad, and it just the way dreams bring in imagery.
Yeah, I didn't notice that.
Anyway, to me, that makes for that's what makes good movies of interest worth watching again, because these are the things that are in the design of them. That you're not necessarily supposed to know right away, or it's not like it's clever, like, oh, there's the guy, but it just sort of like gives it a deeper life.
For sure.
That's why movies that are worth seeing. I liked a movie as a kid or whatever, and I had the wherewithal or autonomy to do so. I'd see a movie 2-3 times a week if I liked it. Back in the day of going to see movies, it's just like. Of
course.
I think I saw The Sting. 3 times in a week. I know I saw The Tenant 23 times in a year or something, because awesome. There was just so much there to see,
I'd almost be ashamed of the ones that I've done when I was 15, 16. Not that I don't like the movies, but like Revenge of the Sith, I went to see.
Was one that you went to see.
Yeah. Oh man,
there's such a beautiful reward in that.
Yeah. Oh, they're yeah, absolutely.
See, I didn't get access to the movie theater until I was almost like college age, just because of where I grew up. I was able to go, but I wasn't able to go without like making my parents drive me like 30 minutes. So it was like, it was an ordeal to do that. But when I hit college and I had my own choices, that was when I was like, I think for me, it was Harmony Korine's Spring Breakers. That was the first movie where I went, I was working at a movie theater at the time, so I could literally just walk in and watch it anytime. And I watched it like 10 times because I was like, this is
awesome.
I can't believe the imagery. I can't believe the musicality and sensation of it. And so, yeah, I definitely had some of those experiences, but not with the Tenet, unfortunately.
Yeah. 23 times. That's impressive.
It is very impressive. But yeah, and eventually this all builds to a climax where the kid has to build using what the plumber calls an air fix, which is like a smell catching device or a juice of some kind. He's like, what if, again, working on child logic, he's like, what if we could turn this into a sound sucking juice and it could absorb the music? Wouldn't that ruin Dr. T's big concerto that he's trying to put on with all of these children? And again, through child logic, what does he put into this thing? String, washer, chain, peanut, bubblegum, checkers, and they stir it all together with a dinosaur bone. He's like, well, that ought to do it. We have now this device that is going to be able to ruin the Academy's big performance of the kids who are all being rolled up in these, giant formations of school buses. Again, the amount of money put into the production design and all of this that they're showing us. And, of course, once again, they can make a music sucking device. But I also love that the power of it is that, just so you know, this thing that we've built is also atomic, which is, the last minute sort of element that doesn't feel like, maybe in the longer version, it would be like more throughout or it would be more set up. It does feel in this version of the movie that it's like all of a sudden there's an atomic bomb in the movie and you're like, wait, what? Where did that come from? You're like, oh no, that can't be that. And it's funny that it's the kid who makes it and the kid who uses it as well.
Bart's not fucking around.
No, because like Dr. T is singing, he's doing his whole thing. He's getting just ready for his show. Has that whole dressing up song. And I got to say, the outfit montage goes incredibly hard as he does that song.
He's dripping.
And yeah. And his lavender spats, all his watermelon suede, all of his his skin bows, all of these things that he's talking about, eventually talking about his chiffon Mother Hubbard lined with a Hudson Bay rat. I was like, dude, where is he coming up with this stuff?
I also like that he doesn't put on a single part of the clothing, it seems. He just has assistants do every single edition, which I thought was just great. Very true to his character, of course.
Yes, and then he stands in front of all of these kids, and he's dressed up. And all of these kids are filling out the massive piano from the opening. There is legitimately hundreds of children on this set, ready to go, playing at a piano. They said that this shooting day was horrifying. I don't know how exaggerated or not this is. Dr. Seuss said that one of the boys vomited and there was a chain reaction of vomiting from some of the children. I have a feeling he was exaggerating because he went on to follow that statement up with saying, the film's reviews were similar to this on-set incident in my mind. There's a chain reaction of vomit going around, but there are some shots included in the movie where there's like kids just like crying at the piano and stuff. I was like, this poor kid, what are they doing to these children? And
just a long day on set can do that.
Yeah, you have to imagine. I mean, and it works for this guy who's like, I'm commanding these 5,000 little fingers all playing together on my piano. And, he's all of these fingers and these children cringing and trebling and groveling before me. And they are all going to play 10 happy little fingers. And every time he goes to announce it, Bart pulls the noise sucking device so that there's no song playing when the kids go. And there's this sort of bumbling repetition that Dr. T tries to do, and it makes his voice like crack and squeak until he eventually realizes what Bart is doing. He says, hand over that inexplicable phenomenon. And Bart goes, come any closer and I'll blow you to smithereens. Is it atomic? Yes, sir. very atomic, and it's so funny that how happy this kid is to announce that. And, immediately Dr. T obviously has to crumble. He gets his mother free. His dad is, his new father is all free. And he also like makes the kids briefly play like what sounds like a horrible rendition of like Chopsticks or something until the device starts smoking and gets ready to blow. And he does actually, the kid, am I correct? The ending of this movie is the kid just nukes the academy and all of the children
pretty much, yeah.
by accident.
It
but that's what he does.
The kids do run away. They have a couple like off-kilter shots where they're just scattered and it's all chaos. But yeah, that the fireworks go off and that castle seems to go down for sure.
God damn.
That is a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
Imagine if the Wizard of Oz end with fucking Judy Garland nuking the Wizard of Oz. Like, that's such a crazy idea for a movie.
That awesome. Was before Los Alamos.
True.
But I was going to say that 1952, 53, when that movie, I don't know when, a lot of movies had radiation or nuclear as the Deus Ex Machina or whatever of the thing. So I mean, to me, it's
absolutely. We're like 2 years out from
funny. It's like
Kiss Me Deadly, right? So there's a lot of movies that had that around that time,
right? So I mean, when he says that, it's atomic, it's like, I think that was just sort of a thing, like I think every Ray Bradbury story for a while, radiation caused this to happen, and. I might have that wrong, but just the idea that there's always something as an explanation. A radioactive spider for Spider-Man, it's true. It became the bugaboo for everything.
What year was The Incredible Shrinking Man? Because that one also had that, I believe. And we covered it. We love that movie. We covered it on the show.
Oh yeah, that was a fantastic movie.
I just can't. I think it's 50s. It's got to be around this time. I'm almost certain of that.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
It's 50s,
57.
Okay,
for that one,
yeah, gotcha.
Jack Arnold.
Yeah. So the theme is it's incredibly powerful. So and using it in this context is just something I don't think I've specifically.
Although it is funny
before.
to be filmed to have it with the Kramer wraparound section that it's just he nukes everyone and then it's like, well, now my mom and my plumber are gonna go out on a date. So everything's fine. Right. I don't have to learn the piano anymore.
And of course, they leave a little magic.
The nuclear family.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah. They leave a little magic for the whole thing where they do the thumbs had the bandages on them, so they're like, was it a dream the whole time? That whole thing. But yeah, it's I guess because you've been in the perspective of a child, this whole wraparound doesn't really bother me. But just knowing what this also could be, just with the stuff that's missing, I am just so curious, but I do love this version of the movie. So.
Oh, me too. Yeah. I mean, if we're pivoting towards the reductive rating round, which for you, Charles, is where we remove all the words and all the nuance and we reduce the movie to a rating between 1 and 5, but it's also become kind of just like final statements or anything any lines we might have missed or any scenes you wanted to bring up right at the end here. For me, this was a very solid 4. I was, even despite the fact that this is, clearly compromised in some fashion from Dr. Seuss's original vision, which apparently had some really grotesque elements that were like even more so and had some more sort of political and social commentary that he was trying to be put into it. And it was retroactively reworked into a sentimental sort of like family film package. I think there's something to be said about the fact that, someone clearly on a commercial level, someone was like, we want our 1950s Wizard of Oz. And they hired Dr. Seuss and was like, no, this is going to be more like a Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, or this is going to be more like, it's going to have more surreal mania to it and bizarro expressionist elements. And it's going to have so many strange and creepy details that really get into the anxieties of a child and the powerlessness of a child. And eventually, obviously, get some cathartic fantasy out of the way, but doing so by the kid taking control of his mother's sexuality and grabbing an atomic bomb and, doing it in such bizarre ways, I think is just fantastic. And obviously the classical Hollywood production design and cinematography and Technicolor and everything that they put into this. There's way more lavish effort put into this movie than I think Kramer maybe intended based on the writing that he was handed in. I'm not sure who lost oversight, what happened where, but this is like an absolutely, hallucinatory film in that way. It's a hypnotic film, and it's one of those astonishingly expensive like box office bombs that you're just like, what have we been like unfairly deprived of? Like, imagine if this was a hit and Dr. Seuss was like the biggest name in movie musicals since Wizard of Oz. Like, what other expressive creations and weird rhyming wordplay would we see externalized in such like vivid analog craft like this? So would we have a Dr. Seuss's, red shoes kind of element? And I don't know, but it's something to think about. And I was quite shocked that there was a Dr. Seuss musical and it was this lavish and was this expensive, and it worked as well as it did, despite presumably, from what I understand, having being cut of 11 songs. So I don't know how much runtime that is.
Wow,
that sounds to me like at least an hour. So
yeah. Because they'd include all the choreography and the production that involved with those songs. There might be musical breaks throughout them as well. It probably would be a significant amount of time.
Yeah, all we have is the name of some of the songs, which is the I Won't Go to Bed or the Massage Opera. What the hell is that?
Yeah, what that one?
The hell is that?
The Butterfly Ballet. Either way, lots of good stuff.
Yeah, I'm same with you. I'm going to give it a 4 as well. I think this is awesome. I'm definitely going to be going back to it. I love the production design. I love that you're in the head of a child the whole time, so it just leaves so much room for imagination and kind of absurdity. It's great. It's kind of like it's a child just teaching adults about morals and trust. They have this one quote in one of the things, and it's about the him talking about how the adults are kind of oppressing him and everything. And it's just simple, but I like it. It's just, I'd hate to grow like some I know. And that's kind of just encapsulating his whole idea. He's just trying to make these adults realize who the bad guy is, and just listen to me kind of thing. I think it's great. I'm definitely going to return to this.
Yeah. And for you, Charles?
I'm not real good at ratings, but as I said, this movie's really imbues me, the inner rungs of my being. So, I give it a 5.
Hell yeah.
But a movie like this to me is like a crazy uncle. It's like I gotta love him. I mean, he has his flaws, but I gotta love him. Yeah. And for me, all the little monitors within monitor, again, that's just something I've been visually fascinated by, that I really think was influenced from this movie. And I don't think we'd have a Twisted Issues without this movie because of the TV within the screen and stuff like that. So, that's
awesome. I don't think there's going to be some people who turn into this episode who are like, wait, that gore movie I love was inspired by a Dr. Seuss musical?
That's awesome.
But I'm really grateful for all this information. I didn't know. I'm glad to learn this stuff, but I don't actively. So the fact that 11 songs didn't go in, and that it actually was even weirder, transgressively so. I find that fascinating. But now I'm like, I want to hear these songs. Or well, is there a vault somewhere?
I think I read on the wiki that the songs as a whole are available. It's just that we don't have the scenes for them. Let me double check that, because they might be
interesting
out there.
Maybe somewhere. They released like a soundtrack back in the day and someone still has it or something. That'd be interesting.
Wow.
I'll have to look into it. God, I wish it was available. Did they ever release?
It was such a bomb. They probably didn't even put out a soundtrack.
No, well, and Dr. Seuss didn't even fight for it either. Apparently, he tried to have like this whole section of his life kind of even taken out of his biography. He was so embarrassed about the whole thing.
Okay, so it does say the
which is
removed
unfortunate.
Songs still survive with the complete musical soundtrack. So I guess it would be a matter of finding that, and I don't know how hard that would be, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But hell yeah. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T here. We're going to be right back, and we're going to be talking about incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies.
Incredible creatures clutching at the thin thread with their miserable lives. Human vultures, only the weird zombies remain.
Sure got a shake.
Obey.
Who is the woman branded in birth wearing the wart of horror?
Do as Madame Estrella said.
The world's first monster musical. The incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies.
All right, we are back, and we are talking the incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies! Exclamation mark, question mark. The 1964 American carnival monster psycho killer musical hangout movie. I don't really know how to describe this exactly. Also known as in variant market titles as The Diabolical Dr. Voodoo, The Teenage Psycho Meets Bloody Mary, or The Incredibly Strange Creatures, or Why I Stopped Living and Became a Mixed Up Zombie, that they wanted to originally use, but apparently were supposedly going to get sued over to do its resemblance to Dr. Strangelove at the time. The tagline for this movie, by the way, we have to mention both of these because they're both incredible, is one, she keeps monsters in cages for pets. He preys on wild go-go girls. I guess that's pretty accurate. The other one is the first monster musical.
Nice.
They really wanted, this was a very salesman heavy pitch and movie, and it is directed, as Charles has already said, by Ray Dennis Steckler. It was written by two guys named Gene Pollack and Robert Silliphant, although I could not find anything else about these guys, so I wasn't sure if these were people he knew, or either way, we'll get into it. And it's starring Steckler under the name of an alter ego he played named Cash Flag as a character named Jerry, who goes with his friends to a Long Beach amusement park carnival and ends up hanging out with some strippers and occultists and a fortune teller who may or may not be turning him into a zombie serial killer. This is our first time talking about the cult trash filmmaker, trash obviously said lovingly, yes. Ray Dennis Steckler, the amateur photographer from Pennsylvania who, after serving in the Korean War, moved to California in hopes of becoming a cameraman and cinematographer in Hollywood, where he apparently found some modest success, as the legend goes anyway, before being fired for nearly causing an on-set accident with Alfred Hitchcock, supposedly, and having to resort to working in the B-movie market, where he met a producer named Arch Hall Sr., who had started a production company to turn his 60s pop musician son, Arch Hall Jr., into a movie star, resulting in a number of forgettable star vehicles, but an honestly very good little junkyard chamber thriller for anyone who knows about this one called The Sadist, which is a movie that's sort of like if Bonnie and Clyde wandered down the road far enough and arrived at like a Hills Have Eyes or a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, kind of is a great little movie, honestly. But he also, Arch Hall Sr., gave Steckler a shot at directing his very first feature film called Wild Guitar, starring the father and son in a low-budget, like, rocker versus corrupt record producer drama, which, from what I understand, is a fairly conventional 60s movie, all things considered, and considering who made it. But he would use that relationship to launch himself into his own strange and independent style of do-it-yourself kind of grindhouse meets home movie making that were these improvised little productions with very limited resources. A lot of the time, I think this was $38,000 and might be one of the more expensive movies that he made. But movies that what they lacked in money and craft, they made up for in passion and with an unconventional, accidental stream of consciousness, surrealism, and self-distributed kind of way of release that definitely made me think about a filmmaker we've talked about on this show. Ed Wood was someone I kind of thought about a little bit, who also had a lot of carny friends and made these kind of lo-fi genre benders, like something like Night of the Ghouls was something I thought about. And also Ed Wood also transitioned to pornos, like Ray Dennis Steckler eventually did, and very artlessly transitioned over into pornos, and maybe was a little unhappy about it. But before then, he occupied this very similar space of a weirdo outsider artist who had lots of imagination and passion, and the kind that kind of outweighed the craft or taste that he was maybe capable of. And I couldn't really find a lot of information about Ray Dennis Steckler, honestly. I know that there's this giant box set that Severin put out that has like every single one of his movies, and I should have had that. We are the Sleazoid show. I should have just went and got that and investigated a little bit more, but the best I could do was found an interview he gave with the Incredibly Strange Film Show, which is what I was kind of asking Charles if that was related at all to what he was talking about, because it was a very in-depth, like 30-minute expose where it was almost like you were watching like an Entertainment Tonight episode on like an auteur, but it was about Ray Dennis Steckler, and I was kind of impressed at how much was actually layered into this interview they talked to his wife and they talked to many of his collaborators. And it was a very revealing interview where he described his goal as essentially making something completely original by never scripting, because he could never afford to shoot the ideas that he would have scripted. So the idea of even writing a script was laughable to him, and simply operating on a pure sort of improvised freedom based on just whatever locations or people were available around him, and which is why a lot of his movies will change gears or change genres on a dime, because he was like, whatever my movie was, it's my movie. That was his attitude. I can put whatever I want in it. If I'm bored shooting this, okay, now it's a zombie movie. Okay, now it's a musical. Now it's whatever, fuck you. It's my movie. This was very much the approach that he had as a filmmaker, and he was pretty resourceful when it came to finding a moment and taking advantage of it. There was one clip that they showed from one of which I think is supposed to be his superhero movie. I tried looking this up. I think it was called Rat Fink
a Boo Boo.
A Boo Boo, yeah. And apparently there's a parade sequence in that, which he shot Larry Cohen style, which was like, there was just an actual parade going on. And he was like, well, now I'm going to put my superhero characters into the parade. And he shot footage of just like kids like waving at his superhero, but they had no idea who they were. They just hijacked an actual parade that was happening, and they shot it guerrilla style. And so that was very much his approach as a filmmaker, and I think that you can see that a lot more in moving away from Wild Guitar, moving into the second film that he made, which was Incredibly Strange Creatures, which is probably the short film I'm going to use for the rest of this episode. But Charles, once again, walk us through your very first time watching this and what was going through your mind the first time that you watched it. I just had a curiosity.
Well, you know, the he got a job, that dick was definitely that resonated for me. I mean, I really think that was the seed scene. Him and Atlas King just sort of just the idea that you could make. Well, I mean, let me just preface. I didn't know this about him. That some of the stuff you said, that like the amount of sort of improvisation and stuff. I actually wonder about that, like how true some of that is, simply because I think it just takes so much. I mean, especially shooting film, you know, you need to have some sort of structure. I don't know. I mean, I think it's a marvelous. Myth. And I'm sure some of it's true.
I mean, based on the way that he was being interviewed, he definitely sounded like someone who was hyping himself up a bit. I don't want to spoil it too much, but there's two legendary camera operators who worked on this film who went on to become incredible cinematographers. And there's at one point in the interview where, I kid you not, he suggests that he's the one who taught Vilmo Sigmund how to shoot like flares and spotlights. He claims that, by extension, maybe he should be, he should have a little bit of that Close Encounters Oscar that he won.
Right.
And I was like, that's a little.
That's awesome.
That's a print
hilarious.
the legend moment,
I love
But
that.
I however one wants to mythologize oneself, that's fine.
Yes.
But still, it was because I don't think I'd made Twisted Issues at that point. I was still just shooting bands. It's I don't want to be reductive and say, well, anyone could do this, so that's why I did it. But just the idea that it just energized me, just realizing that. And it felt like they were friends, and apparently they were friends. They're all friends, and basically all my movies except for American Mummy, everyone in it were friends. I mean, people I knew, and you would cast. I would cast. You find a ready-made and put them in the movie, as opposed to necessarily writing a character that an actor has to fill. It's like, well, this person's a ready-made. And obviously, I wrote my scripts too, and I really wasn't into improvisation. I'm much more into, at least, well, for one thing, I storyboard really extensively. Like I know exactly what I want a shot to look like. But the great thing about that is, then once you show up, then you just move with your, with what's happening. But at least if you get lost or whatever, let's return to the storyboard. Okay, and just find your way again. But this movie, The Sadist, also. I mean, I probably could have easily included The Sadist in my list of films that had influence on me, because that's a very fucked up movie. I don't know if I gleaned that you actually have seen The Sadist. Have you seen The Sadist?
The Sadist we actually did as a watch for, we do these monthly watch parties, and we did it as a first time watch, and with a bunch of our patrons, and every single one of us was blown away at just how almost evil feeling that movie was, in terms of like the sort of hostage situation that goes into it, and the very like sweaty, rusty kind of look of the thing. And
yeah, and that's, I guess, his dad was the first guy who gets killed, the teacher, the protagonist's father, but that also was shot by Bill and Sigmund, and so for all of outsider Ray Dennis Steckler was, nonetheless, Laszlo Kovacs, Vilmos, again, they weren't big at that time, but it just kind of gives you a sense of the community of artists and technicians who were available to him. And as a note, the Silliphant, his brother was Sterling Silliphant, who wrote like Naked City. So I mean, Silliphant.
Oh wow.
Whoever, yeah. So I mean, that's definitely, I won't call it Hollywood royalty, but I mean, that's definitely his brother made a great name for himself, Sterling Silliphant. But just the and I just love the wonderful absurdity of the dances and the kind of like, some of it was I think competent choreography and stuff like that. These were actual dancing girls, some of them, but some of the choreography, and I guess I had the impression, and I was incorrect, I guess, that Ray Dennis Steckler had actually choreographed as well, which I just loved, because I just thought the dancing was so bad. But I just loved that, just the hubris of someone. I'm going to choreograph it too, And then I also loved, and I do think this had an influence on Twisted Issues, but kind of coming at it from the back end, the musical numbers, very heartfelt, earnest musical numbers that just in the context is just hilarious. I mean,
and they're kind of used as like stitching too, when the movie, kind of doesn't know exactly where to go. Sometimes it goes back to one and it finds its way in. And I was curious. So you're saying you watched this in the 80s? Did someone like show it to you? Did you watch it like at home? Did it play in a revival theater? Because I think this is important.
It would have been a VHS.
Okay.
That
because
this is now strange. I was going to say, because Incredibly Strange Films, which is, again, you need to find this book if you don't know this book. Incredibly Strange Films. The publisher is Research. RE is is capital letters, then search, I think is how they do it. They also did a book called Modern Primitives, Industrial Culture, a book on Ballard, J.G. Ballard, a book on Burroughs. I mean, they're definitely, a period of the late 80s and 90s, early 90s, every hipster's bookshelf would have had a research library, books from this. So, industrial culture would have been Byron Geisen and Monty Kazaza and some of these industrial musicians. And Incredibly Strange Films was the one that kind of, Modern Primitives really set off the whole piercing thing, like that piercing and tattooing. That wasn't a phenomenon until this book called Modern Primitives came out. And similarly, Incredibly Strange Films, I think, was a seminal book in terms of just making people aware of Al Adams and Ray Dennis Steckler. I'm drawing a blank on a lot of them, but
I can see the names here are like Herschel Gordon Lewis, like Russ Meyer, Larry Cohen.
Which now we all know those guys, right? Because it's true, cool, and but trust me, people didn't know those guys. I mean, it was much until that book came out, and then suddenly Hep Cats, were like, well, let's check out some Herschel Gordon Lewis.
See, we're in the era where we'd be trying to add guys like Ron Ormond or like Curtis Harrington, or I'm trying Doris Wishman. Maybe you could throw in there.
Sure, and I actually don't know the first one you mentioned, but sure, Curtis Harrington. I mean, what's marvelous about, I guess, culture and exposure is, then you just dig deeper. You want to keep digging deeper. Like, whoa, what the hell? We just become these burrowing culture machines, trying to.
If we can recommend anything to you, Ron Ormond is a guy is an exploitation filmmaker who nearly died and had like a come to Christ moment, and he teamed up with a Baptist minister named Estes Perkel, and they are in full unhinged reactionary like Baptist minister, and so it was an unlikely duo of guys where he was taking sort of almost like a roadshow to various churches, these functionally educational films telling kids to, not become communists, to fear hell, but it was directed by a legitimate like vaudeville exploitation guy, and so they're disgusting and filthy movies. His big one is If Footmen Tire You, What Will Horses Do, I think is the big one, and there's another one called The Burning Hell, and both of them were about don't go to the drive-ins, don't have sex, it's like, or else you're going to go to hell, or Castro's going to invade America, and all of these various things. But they're very vividly made exploitation movies, and honestly, there's some painting in here in the dream sequences where there's some painting on their faces that actually is very similar to Ron Ormond's depiction of hell in The Burning Hell, when they're having like all those like weird psychedelic, and it's almost like they're fragmented like face paint and stuff like that, and I was like, made me think about that a little bit. But
these movies
where might one find these Ron Ormond? I mean, are they?
There's actually a region-free Blu-ray box set released by Indicator that has a bunch of his films and made by. Yeah, so you should. Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking it out.
On my list, my friend. On my list. Thank you. No, I mean that's marvelous, right? I mean, it's just. It's just.
But not to derail it, I was just curious about what your first experience with it was, just because, like, so from what I understand, a lot of people's first experience with this movie now is through Mystery Science Theater 3000, where they obviously cover bad or camp movies or movies that they make fun of, and which is obviously it's something we've talked about on the show. It's kind of an unfortunate thing because there's so many films that I don't think that, it's not how we prefer to engage with films. I get why some people do, right? Yeah. But for the same reason, this is known to a lot of people.
Yeah.
In the same way as an Ed Wood movie is known, and you can sort of see why, in the sense that just like some of the The footage is very clearly padded out. So much of this is like him and his friends walking around Long Beach and riding roller coasters and hanging out at an amusement midway and just like kind of looking at the decor and watching what kind of does feel like open mic performances sometimes, where it's just especially the comedian character who pops up. But I do think that Steckler has something interesting where he does manage through the sort of no budget exploitation style and the sort of assembly of it to, he gets some eccentric, cheapo, some carnival atmosphere to it. Like when you're hanging out with the fortune tellers or the showgirls, you feel like you're in like a freaks like sideshow drama a little bit. Or when the burlesque shows start, it does have this kind of, even when it's amateurish, it does feel kind of dreamy and strange, and then it ends up using those to eventually transition into its hypnotic serial killer movie that it gets into, which we'll talk about. Steckler, his performance when he goes like wide-eyed in the hoodie, going like psycho killer mode is quite entertaining. And then obviously, because of the title, they have to throw in some acid zombie monster mayhem kind of near the end. And even if it's done in this very kind of cheap and sometimes a little bit awkward fashion, there is something very playful about it. And, even with the limitations, it's clear he's trying to generate mood, and there's something charming about that. And there's something kind of confident about it. I don't know that I could have, I would have been like, I don't have the resources to pull these things off. I'm not even going to try. And there's something beautiful about the guys who push through that and they go, I am going to try, and I am going to work with these guys and try to light and stage this. And
No, the thing is, and I love things like this, the hypno wheel when he's being hypnotized. I love really
it's amazing.
Simple stuff like, and seriously, Twisted Issues owes a lot to that movie. There's a part in Twisted Issues just during a trip sequence, though, but I'm using Ferris wheels from Alachua County State Fair or something in Florida, and on this recent rewatch of Incredibly Strange Creatures, I see those Ferris wheels and I'm like, okay, I know I borrowed that, or just like that. It's weird. I look at my movies and I'll see things. Okay, I exactly grabbed that from The Hitcher. There's a part of We Await. My character enters the room where the guy thinks he's safe. He's safe in this kitchen, and suddenly footsteps. The first thing he hears are the footsteps, and that's basically a ripoff from The Hitcher. Where
we love The Hitcher on this show.
The Hitchers. Yeah, no, that's an archetype in my my palette, and but what's interesting, I don't know that I knew it at the time, but as I watch, I'm like, dude, you borrowed that right from The Hitcher. But it's essentially the same moment. This kind of, and speaking of We Await now, but. Anyway, so back to this, just the doing it, and you have to also stand from the context I was coming from, punk rock, 3 chords.
Yep.
Energy and attitude, like we can pull this shit off. And similarly, particularly this movie of Ray Dennis Steckler. I watched I don't think I finished it, The Lemon Grove Kids. And I watched, and I've definitely seen, I think a Boo Boo, I would have seen that around the same time I saw this. After this, The Thrill Killers. I don't think all this stuff is as strong as this. I think this is probably, for me, though I haven't seen all of these films, this for me is his most successful in terms of just really, I suspect, wedding his vision with actually making it happen. But again, very ambitious, the dance numbers. My fucking God, it's like Busby Berkeley stuff. Not from above, but I just mean this very ambitious. But he had I guess women were in town from some show. He also lived in Vegas, so But it's just he was. There's a performer, a woman named Kembra Fowler, artist, performer, who's in a band called The Voluptuous Horror of Karen Black. And she has a brief cameo in Red Spirit Lake, but she referred to herself as an availabilist. She uses what is available. And I kind of, I read that in an interview of her, but I mean, I've been an availabilist for years because that's totally how I've approached my stuff, because my stuff literally is like no budget, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Beer and, you got to feed everyone. You can't not make a movie without feeding people. I mean, that's just bottom line. But, from flashlights is, anyway, I mean, it's just, and the thing is, once you make the step that, this is the world this movie lives in, whatever that limitation might be, just becomes part of it. And a huge influence on me would have been, I think it's not, there's an Ed Wood movie, Night of the Demon or something. There's an Ed Wood movie that the first shot, it looks like it's shot in someone's rec room, like paneled walls and there's I
wish that narrowed down Ed Wood movies. I've seen a lot of them. Unfortunately,
you've definitely seen more than me. But I mean, I know that in this one movie, and then there's a sign on the wall, and it's a piece of paper taped to the wall, and it says police station.
Okay, I think you are talking about Night of the Ghouls, which is one that we really like. And it was one that reminded me a lot of this, honestly, because it was similar to just the idea of like that is also, kind of set at this weird like abandoned carnival thing. And he has his friend in that Criswell, who was like a whatever, like a fake Swami kind of guy. And it's literally a movie about like staging these fake seances. It's so funny how that kind of enters the value of the movie as like you're looking at the chintziness of it. And it's like, well, also like this character is, this very bullshit character who's about to fall apart. So when the sets start falling apart, you're like, oh yeah, this character is just getting exposed. And obviously it was a limitation. And obviously some of it is unintentional. But there's parts of it where it's just, like sometimes the freedom that you just had to be like, we're going to do with it. And it maybe the movie's going to be like a half remembered dream of a version of a movie that I love. And, there's something appealing to watching characters on a no budget level, pull that off. I did feel similarly watching this for the first time, because I think, Jamie, this is for both of us is our first time experiencing Ray Dennis Steckler at all. We've heard about him. We had been meaning to get around to him and kind of dedicating an episode to him, but we were glad that you picked him for this. And I don't know. I the one thing I really appreciated about him was I guess similarly to Ed Wood, you could say, was that he also put himself into the energy of the movie, and he was on screen. I mean, my favorite Ed Wood movie, kind of just because it's the one where he does that, is Glen or Glenda. Oh yeah. I think that there's something so kind of heartfelt about what the pleading and the passion behind what he's actually trying to say, whether he knows exactly how to say it or, and I felt something sort of similar to the expression of this, maybe not on like a sort of like a deep or sexual level like it is in that film, but I felt something similar to, Steckler as Cash Flag, as Jerry, kind of pitching this world where, he's telling you his philosophy. He just wants to have fun. He doesn't want to go to work. He wants to hang out with his friends. The world is depressing. So I'm going to have a swinging time at the Long Beach Carnival, which is what then kind of goes wrong with this character, right? Is that he ends up kind of being infected by the madness of this place in a way, which is set up kind of in the early sequences where we meet the carnival fortune teller Estrella, played by Brett O'Hara, who, she's told that she's too ugly to prostitute herself to one of her clients, and she should sleep with the freaks instead. And, she's having people at the carnival call her ugly. So she calls in a henchman named Ortega, to beat this man into one of her little pets. And she pours hydrochloric acid on his face as he's screaming in the opening of the film. And it switches to these like sudden handheld, like Dutch angle, violent chaos kind of energy. And it reminded me of how we talked about Doris Wishman would film violence in something like Bad Girls Go to Hell, where it all of a sudden, it got really hysterical, and, the camera would just like spin inside of an apartment or something like that. Or, you'd get these shots of just things happening on the sides of the room. And in this case, we find, they're kind of setting up a larger plot that we're going to wrap around back to. And the rest of the film is kind of aimlessly working our way back to this, but with a little bit of ominous atmosphere. There's a little bit of sort of weird screeching, some sounds that kind of sound like a theremin, but I wasn't really sure. I was like, I don't even think he can afford a theremin.
And he'll include them in strange scenes, like when they're just on the. I think there's a moment where they're all on the Ferris wheel, and it almost feels like they're kind of just normally interacting with each other as friends in some way, but the theremin or whatever synth is going on just makes it ominous and creepy, like something is off here. And he implements that quite a bit, I think, throughout the film. Yeah, and there's
hints of disorientation even when they're doing something as simple as walking up and down a 60s like carnival midway, essentially, and walking in and out of various musical acts inside the establishments, and you'll get like a close up of like a grotesque like clown face, you know, on the side of a building or something like that. And
I think it's,
you know, and then
I think it's also interesting that he doesn't show you the friend group right away. He actually just straight up tells you that this fortune teller is, you know, pouring poisonous acid on people and doing all these crazy things.
There isn't really much of a mystery if you think about it, but they do set it up as one, I guess. Yeah,
and I guess I didn't mind it because it's still, once they apply the group and they get together with the fortune teller, there's already some tension involved because you know she's up to no good, so it still kind of works in a way. But yeah, I just found that interesting just to open that up. He just kind of goes, he's very aggressive about it. Just like, this is who we're dealing with. And then you go from there.
He wants to set her up, and then he wants to also set up the character of Marge, who is played by Steckler's then wife, Caroline Brandt, who I loved in the interview that she gave on the Incredibly Strange Films show episode or whatever, where she said, you know, I thought one day he was going to win an Oscar. It's a beautiful moment. She says completely sincerely.
Love that.
Yeah. No, it is called the City of Dreams for a reason. I mean, I guess, you know, gosh, but yeah, I love the opening. I love Ortega. I mean, what the fuck is going on with his face? That's what I like. Is it a mask? I mean, the nose is
unclear.
Fake. Yeah,
the facial hair looks like it's been like glued on.
Yeah. That's kind of the
I was just gonna say like going back to the or not going back, but using as that piece of paper that says police station. You know, if you accept that, okay, we're in a police station. Okay, you know, well, you're on the ride, buddy. You know, you know, it's a police station. Yeah, I accept. You know, and so you just accept. Once you accept the reality of any movie, then you're in the movie. I mean, you know, I mean, to me, early on for me, I felt like a movie is a ride, and you get on the, you know, you can't get off a ride once you're on a ride. You know what I mean? Like typically you're inside, you know, and that's how I always just kind of viewed movies and how I enjoyed movies. And you know, there's a period when I lived in New York City, I would go to 42nd Street to see matinees, and it would always be a double and triple feature matinees for like $5.
Yeah.
And you sneak in your weed and your beer and no problem. No one gave a shit. You could smoke cigarettes in there and stuff. And I there was a Hulk Hogan movie, No Holds Barred, something like that. And in between, I love Jean-Claude Van Damme. I fell in love with his movies on 42nd
Oh my God,
Street.
We dedicated a whole month of the show to Jean-Claude Van Damme here, so we are well versed.
But, you know, it was in between two movies I wanted to see was No Holds Barred, and I wasn't that interested in Hulk Hogan. But within a very short time, like, you know, he'd beat someone's ass or whatever, and then he'd look at the camera and do this kind of Hawaiian thing where your little fingers up, you know, it's like I'm sure it's called something, but it's a gesture, you know, hey, and at that point I realized, okay, this movie's made for fifth graders, and then suddenly I just downshifted into fifth grade, and I was there. I enjoyed the hell out of it. I was like cheering, and so I similarly with any movie, like it's just for me, and you know, if you're going to get on the ride, just, you know, you're on the ride. You know, don't expect you're going to watch, because at the same time, I love Tarkovsky. appreciate, I won't say I love, but I appreciate the woman who did Le Rendezvous de Dana, Chantal Ackerman. You know, I mean, there's something to love about pure cinema but it also lives within its own world, you know, and certainly Tarkovsky. Yeah. I mean, Tarkovsky is someone, you know, that's where I had this notion, like a cinema as temple. You know, you just go and you respectfully spend your 3.5 hours or however long the movie is, engage with it on its terms. I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. You know, every movie you just kind of have to engage with on its terms. And so Ed Wood, Ray Dennis Steckler, and so on. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Totally agree. And he is creating, by the way, his own little world. His wife, who's playing Marge, who is the sort of drunken dancer who does one of the very sort of opening dancing duet, and she's meant to be one of the more sort of elegant performers at this amusement park. She also has a wild guitar poster like in her dressing room. And I was like, there you go, man. He's already getting the promo in. He's already crossing over. He knows what he's doing. He's a little bit of a self promoter. He has a little bit of that attitude about it too, while also, you know, I kind of agree that with the idea that, you know, even if, you know, he's trying to do this as unscripted as possible, there's some stuff in here that's obviously staged. Like there's the ominous black cat who's showing up, and there's these sort of dizzying point of view shots of like lights and the crowd as she's like messing up her dancing at one point. The stuff that comes off a little bit more like he maybe captured it in the moment is stuff like watching that stand-up comedian just like bomb with his "my wife" bits, where, you know, if I didn't stop drinking, she was gonna leave, and I'm sure gonna miss her. And you can hear one guy just be like cough. You know?
I think you hear one guy actually just cackle. It was one dude, I think.
Yeah. There are two sides to every argument. My wife and her mother's. Just classic
classic
bits.
Well, you know, Rat. But I will say this: I do think, you know, he would definitely roll with the punches. I'm not saying that he would be improvise everything, but you do. I mean, filmmaking really is about rolling with the punches, because unless you have a huge budget, you kind of got to roll with the punches. And so, for example, Rat Fink a Boo Boo, apparently. It's Rat Fink and Boo Boo, like, you know, Batman and Robin.
Yes.
But whoever did the titles fucked it up. And the titles came back as Rat Fink a Boo Boo, like A instead of and. And they couldn't afford to do new titles. So they said, well, fuck it. It's called Rat Fink a Boo Boo. And it's, you know, and then it just becomes its own sort of
lean into it.
Damaged language. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's what's so interesting. And apparently with this one too, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to the actual sequences, because there's a whole hypnotizing factor. There's a whole monster factor to this movie. And he did deploy some straight up William Castle style gimmicks when he took this on the road. Like he did try to like say that his movie was going to hypnotize the audience into a murderous rage. He hired guys and himself sometimes operated as like a monster suit, and he would jump out during the final reel when the monsters are escaping and start trying to like freak people out. Get people.
Wasn't that
people
like
kind of
William Castle
involved.
did that for the Tingler?
Yeah.
The
same exact same idea. Like he had a little bit of that hustler mindset when it came to distributing, and that
nurses will be in attendance.
Yes, that energy infects, you know, the film, even when again there's a lot of footage in here that I could understand of people being like, you know, they're hanging out at the beach or they're riding various carnival coasters that you could just go and ride, and you know,
or
but there's an element to it
out of sequence or out of context in some sense. Not that they ever get. It's cool to watch those because, you know, it is kind of a stitching together of the actual plot and the dramatics and everything, but each performance is very different. They do have elaborate costuming that's different in each one. So like there's at least a variety, even though sometimes I felt like maybe you could cut one or two of them out just for the sense of keeping the focus of the movie. But I think that he is capturing quite a bit of different art, and I can't help but respect that.
Yeah, and then trying to structure it around like a drive-in movie in a way, almost like trying to be like, here is, like the very loose plot, if like is just that this fortune teller is turning patrons into murderous creatures essentially by just disfiguring them with acid and hypnotizing them. That's ultimately what she's doing. And Jerry is about to become her latest victim when they run into the dancer, Marge, who goes to the fortune teller and gets very scared because she is given the card of death and triggers this sort of like hand to appear behind a curtain. And she's so scared. You're like, oh no, she becomes disoriented and very afraid. And then Jerry and his friends decide to go in, including his vaguely... I couldn't tell what Charles said Mexican, but I almost thought for some reason I almost read it like his pal was meant to be like Russian or something as well. Atlas King. I couldn't tell what he was trying to do with his accent, but that his girlfriend is Angela, played by Sharon Walsh, and they all go in. They sit around this crystal ball, and Angela is told via her palm reading that she's going to be very rich and she's going to be married to a man that her mother doesn't approve of, which she thinks is Jerry, because Jerry is again this unemployed, proudly uneducated guy who just wants to enjoy life, and Angela's mother and brother are not stoked about that. But she's also told via the crystal ball that someone who is near her is going to die a death near water. Is what she is told. And this kind of triggers a little bit of this more sort of fatalistic element of the film, as we are eventually going to lead to, death for someone. And at first we are seeing it via Jerry because, they leave Estrella's fortune telling tent and they watch this strip show that includes a stripper named Carmelita, who is Estrella's sister. And she stares at Jerry, and it's this very like close up on the eyes, and it's this icy stare. She just immediately locks into him. And it's presumed, she kind of hypnotized him a little bit, or she at least seduced him in this way to come to the strip show, despite obviously his girlfriend's protests, who was like, why do you want to go to a strip show? We should go ride some roller coasters, which I do like leads to a song. I think it's like Angela who does. Is it Angela? I couldn't tell if it was like a dream thing or if it was someone else who was meant to play her, but it almost looks like...
the girl in the white dress. I think.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't think it is. I think it is supposed to be somebody else, but it almost looks like very briefly Angela's feelings got hurt, and then she's in like the Twin Peaks Roadhouse, and she just starts like singing about how hurt her feelings are or something. That's how it played to me, even though I don't know that that's what's happening.
Yeah, because I think they do a fade from her going through that to the singing number. I might be mistaken on that, but I thought that's what I recall. And so I think that is kind of what, because I thought the same thing, I'm pretty sure, where I feel like that it just implies in your mind that it could be her expressing herself or something like that. I still think it works because even if it is a different person, you could just say, I guess the song itself is expressing what's going on with the plot. But
the musical performances and the routines that we're seeing are actually starting to interact with the characters in some capacity, or some of the ways that they're feeling. I felt the same way about the use of color, like the way that they would have those red flowing capes on some of the characters, or the way that they would use the doorways and the drapes. There's these huge like mustard yellow drapes during some of the her performances. I think during Carmelita's, when she's doing her long gloved Piper of Love routine, where she's actually stripping and kind of going down behind the curtain and everything like that. But she eventually passes a note to Jerry to meet her out back after the show. And he follows her into what becomes, as Charles was alluding to, the hypno wheel, this like twirling, hypnotizing spiral wheel where her sister, the fortune teller Estrella, is coaxing him into this deep sleep inside this spinning hole, as she calls it. And it's at this point where I did see some of Steckler, like actually there's more staged filmmaking actually taking place. The use of crossfades, the use of the sound design, the way that even that brief shot that I'm assuming one of the two genius cinematographers of just zooming in and out on his eyeballs that are lit by a spotlight, and it's going at the speed of like the spinning wheel. I thought that was actually really effective.
Yeah. They end up having some really cool effects, that because they have to get through a lot of the violence that's in the movie. At least a lot of it seems to be more implied than shown, probably for budgetary reasons. But The way that they end up doing it is a lot of like shadow work, which I thought ended up being pretty effective. The first one, very effective, I thought, where they show.
It's blatantly Psycho when he turns into the rampaging zombie, and he's Estrella's to command, and one of her first things that she commands is she promised the disoriented Marge, who is living in this world of like spinning cameras now and is so freaked out that she's gonna die, and she's like, well, I'm gonna realize her fortune and have Jerry go and kill her. And it's so funny that it is just Ray Dennis Steckler in a hoodie doing the widest eyes you've ever seen in your life, and doing these like shadow motions of stabbing her with a knife like mid performance. And it's such a ridiculous image, but it is kind of pretty well cut together, I think.
I think just watching, because at first you just see her face as the shadow, and I think what it is just the knife going into the shadow, I think has a lot of, obviously a lot of violent implications. And it's not shown. They do an aftermath shot of her body laying there, and she has like cut up,
and there's the crowd like screaming and stuff too.
It's still in there. I guess it's just he had to find obviously innovative ways to do the actual stabbings, the gore of it all, because it can't be really on screen with what he was given, I suppose.
There's none of that Herschel Gordon Lewis goop. For sure.
and I think he does shadow work pretty well later on too, where there's this woman, one of the dancers is supposed to go on a date, and he ends up stabbing the date in the back, and it's the same kind of shot, but it's a shadow on the wall, and he stabs her. But before that, there's this really cool moment where the camera pans from the hallway over to the girl where she kind of is changing, and then it pans back to the hallway, and it's complete darkness except you can see the shadowy figure of Steckler, and then he just starts running like full speed down the hallway with the knife. And I thought it was a pretty scary and effective setup. So that was also one that kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he definitely knew how to make movies, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But because of the various monetary and other, and like the casting of the girlfriend, I got from his commentary was, she was a dancer in a different scene. And then I guess whoever was supposed to be the girlfriend didn't show up or something, and he said, "Hey, you want to be the girl, my girl?" Well, I've already been in a dancing scene. In other words, she had more consciousness of continuity, and he was like, "No, that'll be fine," And
you might have just told us what happened, because we totally thought the girlfriend and the singer were the same character for a second, and maybe it was the same actress.
No, I think she was a dancer, not the singer. I think you're talking about the kind of sweet faced singer who's saying this. I don't believe that's the same actress. But I could be wrong. But definitely.
Go ahead.
It was just funny that some people who work in this business or whatever, they know about continuity, and she was the one who's telling the director, I don't think that's good. She didn't want to say, I don't think that's going to work, but she's like, well, I'm already the dancer. That'll be fine. No one will notice or whatever.
Throw away.
As an availabilist myself, I can just relate to that. It'll be okay.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do think that he as a director shows off more strength when he does get into this more sort of surreal nightmare stuff that he's doing. Like I like the sequence when he gets hypnotized and he becomes a murderer, but even more impressive, I think, is the actual nightmare sequence after he does the murders, and it's all of these, people in the sort of carnival outfits and the face paint, and it's like in this sort of synchronized routine that's like cross-cut with the ride footage, and all these various women being like, Jerry, and like fire effects are going, and Estrella is there being like, obey, kill, and like you're getting the full sort of confused hysteria of this like gap in his memory that's about to form about what he did, what does it feel like to be controlled by someone else, and the amount of just like color and sort of crossfading and editing that's taking place in this very cheap exploitation shooting style, I think is fairly effective. And I think that it ends up becoming this very funny moment where, because I mentioned Ron Orman because it was reminding me of some of the ways that he would depict hell in The Burning Hell, and it was funny to think about Jerry's version of hell is just like all the women in his life. Just like they're pulling me every which direction. I don't know. There's something funny about Jerry, just as like, this is like the one, he's like, I don't have work and I don't have a job. The one thing that is like disturbing my mindset is all of these various women that I'm running into. And it's very funny because as soon as he wakes up and he has no memory of doing the murderous rampage, his first thought is to go to Angie and like go to apologize to her and stuff like that. So it's so funny that like that's the moment, you know, right after that he's kind of triggered to do that. And I actually thought the poolside sequence was pretty effective too, when he goes up to her and she starts you know, unbeknownst, I don't know why you would do this unbeknownst, but she just starts spinning her umbrella next to the pool, and it triggers obviously this like dazed, you know, out of his mind state that he goes in, and he actually starts strangling her. And it's actually done with these flash cuts where, you know, he's seeing the dancing woman Marge, who Estrella told him to kill, and so he thinks he's strangling Marge, and then it, you know, keeps changing between Marge and Angela, and eventually, you know, the brother has to come in and push him off, and everyone is just terrified looking at him, and he just realized that, yeah, I just tried to strangle my girlfriend to death. And it's like this, you know, really kind of harrowing moment, honestly, which is then funny that obviously, you know, he doesn't have much of a budget, so it's followed by a lot of him like aimlessly wandering around Long Beach, like feeling sad
and hearing the news about the stabbing that he did and everything. Yeah, I do. And but
the actual sequence itself, I think, is pretty well handled.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. And I do really like that, like, because we've been talking about the dance sequences mixing in with the plot, and every once in a while it feels a little bit disjointed, but I do like in that nightmare sequence, it kind of, all his themes and all the things he's been doing, both like dramatically, musically, horror wise, kind of all come together, and it feels like the ideas are completely cohesive. So I did really appreciate that. And yeah, just I did really like the little switch up they do where she spins the umbrella, and then when they return, like they kind of open up the frame again. It's the other woman that he thinks he has to kill. There's some actually really cool creative ways to do this kind of psychological breakdown that Jerry's going through, I guess.
Yeah, on $30,000.
Yeah,
with your
exactly,
friends.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. But
then I think this leads into another dance number where they do kind of like it almost sounded like it's like a twist and shout kind of song, but it is different, but it has that kind of
you could not escape rhythm. The twist, man.
Yeah,
the twist was the biggest thing in the fucking world. You were going to do the twist. If you were making a movie in the 1960s, this almost reminded me of the beatnik stuff in like what's that Roger Corman movie with Miller, with Dick Miller,
Bucket of Blood.
Yeah,
Bucket of Blood. The weird like beatnik music community in that reminded me of some of the ways that they were depicted.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But and there's a whole bunch of performances. There's the Wandering Wonderland by a guy named Don Smith, who's doing this sort of like acoustic love ballad thing that he's doing. They introduce this Carrie Randall and her golden voice. There's also a very strange burlesque dance using like red and yellow like fire dresses. And then an African jungle show that I was really confused about. Briefly, I was like, "What is this show?"
What's this one?
Is that the one where the zombies finally break out during that show? Right?
That's the one where the zombies break out and they actually attack it. And I was like, "Thank God, end that one before they get to wherever they're going."
One of the moments that I thought was absolutely hilarious, because Jerry, you know, initially he gets the first hypnotization and everything, and then the second one at the poolside. But by the third one, it made me laugh because it didn't. It was such an easy setup for him to fall into it again. So he goes back to Carmelita, and she goes like, "Well, if you want to know what's behind the curtain, just open it." And as soon as he opens it, there's already another hypnotizing spinning.
They are already spinning the hypno wheel again. Yeah,
again. And it just, I don't know. But the third time, it almost made me laugh, and not in a bad way. I thought it was very entertaining. It was just how simply he fell into the whole murder.
Oh yeah, no, he's
again.
Being funny too. Like it is 100%. Like he's just like, that's such a ridiculous situation to be in that he's like not figuring this out. And and then he's being asked to kill like Carmelita's show girlfriend Stella, who's the one who's like suspicious briefly of Estrella's involvement in Marge's death, and you know, and her bozo dinner date with his hat and cane, who's like, a date is you cooking me dinner, baby, you know. What a great pickup line.
Yeah. And then I guess that's when the palm reader and Ortega are attacked by zombie freak monster.
Yeah, that's when the final reel is where they circle back to that opening, and it is, they finally go, okay, I guess we got to go back to the plot. We set up a plot here, and it's so funny. It feels a little rushed when it gets there. They're just like,
sure,
they do set up Estrella's like, now that I'm done with Jerry, I'm going to throw acid in his face and disfigure him, and he's going to be added as a little pet to my collection, which we find out is these various disfigured carnival patrons that have been turned into these monsters or these zombies, as she calls them, who visited her booth and just like annoyed her essentially. And in trying to add him to the collection, she accidentally frees them all. And they end up escaping. And it's so funny that they just like forget. It's almost like they just forget to close the door. And all of a sudden you just get these guys in like zombie Halloween masks, just like running out of the basement and just being like, we're free. And they're just rampaging. They start killing literally everybody. Estrella, Carmelita, Ortega, the weirdly gross henchman. And then they start spreading out into the larger carnival itself, almost like, I don't know, like it's like when the cannibal family, or not the cannibal family, I don't remember if they are in the Fun House. I was thinking of Tobe Hooper's movie where you have all the people who live in the carnival and they come out, and these characters all just start, I guess freaks is maybe the better reference point.
Sure.
Yeah, they do start getting this kind of revenge during this dance show, and they're killing people, and then the cops just show up. I actually laughed out. This had to have been a gag. I laughed out loud when the cop slides into the scene and starts executing like some of the zombies, just zombies. Like tush, tush, tush. But he literally slides in, and I was like, what?
Oh yeah, and it's
well, I bet that happened. I bet that happened for real.
Yeah.
They're not going to cut. They're not going to yell cut. Let's go with it.
Yeah, they're like,
do you want to go for another take on that? No, it's fine. We got it. We're moving.
No, it's fine. Yeah,
Slide was kind of stylish.
And it is funny that this movie has a monster movie massacre finale, because you would not know that based on anything other than, I guess, like that's why they throw that scene at the beginning to get you a little bit of that, sort of horror and violence in there. But you would not otherwise think that this movie has this kind of finale and ends up with Jerry, who is now sort of half zombified, running away in confusion, and essentially getting shot to death by the cops on what looks like the Planet of the Apes beach, and dying by the water, like obviously fulfilling the fortune teller's kind of prophecy that someone, would close to Angie would die.
There's some really cool moments in this, I thought, too, where the camera starts to just kind of use the waves in the rocks as a way to represent like the chaotic nature of the scene in a way. And then eventually when he's on top of the rocks, kind of just, I can't remember, is he pleading not to be shot, or is he just kind of struggling through the whole process that he's going through because he's becoming a zombie?
He kind of just looks confused, and he's like yelling.
Yeah. So eventually he does.
I don't think he's aware of what's going on. It's like,
that's what it feels like. He's losing himself and his like humanity, I guess. And he gets shot from the cops, and they do this kind of cool moment where it shows the impact a little bit, and then it's almost like they take the camera and just throw it into a rock that falls.
It starts like twirling or something.
It's kind of strange. And then it almost implies like he falls into the water and not only drowns but hits a rock and it hits his head or whatever it is, and then he just kind of washes up and he dies there instead. So they have kind of a second dramatic
you get that mournful pullout
Yeah.
of like, poor Jerry. He just didn't want to work and wanted to have fun, and now he's an incredibly strange creature.
An incredibly dead,
who became a mixed up zombie. So sad.
Yeah.
I hate when that happens to me, when my friends and I go to the beach carnival.
I do like the whole, again, with the camera work though, I do like the zoom out that they do as they're mourning him, and the cop looks legitimately kind of guilty, which is an interesting moment. And then the credits too, just having it all based on the rocks, like the big waves hitting the rocks and everything, I think suited it well. So I thought it was a pretty good finale, all things considered, with their obvious budgetary restrictions, but The ideas.
Yeah, I mean that'll just be it for some people. For some people, you have to do Charles's method. You have to engage with the film that you're kind of given here. There's a lot of inherent chintziness to this, and there's a lot of flaws that you could pick out with, that someone who has more time and money could fix. And but I think all things considered, there is a lot of just pure passion and ambition to make a movie with your friends and to make a crazy, delirious, strange movie that just totally suits all of your weirdo carny friends and your Vegas showgirl friends and the various tastes and interests that you have in movies. And if we are pivoting towards reductive rating round, that's why this one ended up getting a solid 3 for me. Nice. I think that maybe I'm grading on a curve of no budget or low budget filmmakers, but I thought the grindhouse meets home movie quality of this was something that I did appreciate. And maybe, and especially if he did not use any scripts and he just ran around on pure improvisation of imagination, then it's even more impressive, because there's some stuff in here that had to have been planned or staged in some capacity, or who knows, maybe when you got when you have Vilmos Sigmund and Laszlo Kovacs just hanging around shooting footage for you, it ends up coming off a little bit better than it should, and it certainly doesn't hurt. So the fact that these guys managed to turn like this tiny little Long Beach amusement park, and from what it sounds like, some super cheap like sound stages that were in an abandoned Mason temple in Glendale that was owned by Rock Hudson. I couldn't believe this detail when I read this, but I was like, okay, I guess so. Because I guess that's where all the sort of like interior, dreamier stuff kind of takes place. I thought they managed some charming and creepy haunted funhouse atmosphere out of this, even when it's low rent and just showing you sort of tacky decor, or just showing you, various rides at the amusement park and all of this kind of stuff. Like, I was pretty impressed that he managed to, with these locations and these friends, that he managed to find a kind of sideshow freak drama in it. He managed to find a sort of carnival showgirl burlesque musical out of it. And I think he fares even better when he actually goes horror mode and he starts doing the hypnotic, sort of very subjective, hysterical serial killing sequences with Steckler himself just going around psycho style, murdering people in his hoodie, going super wide-eyed, having crazy dreams that he doesn't understand how to react to, and leading all to that crazy acid zombie monster finale that it has. And there's definitely a lot of stuff to pick out if you're going into it not open to it. But if you like filmmakers like Ed Wood, which we do on the show, if you like Ron Ormond, or if you like, I think that there's a lot of enjoyment to find here. And even if it's not on the same level of some of these films for me, if you just like carny horror, if you like Freaks, if you like Carnival of Souls, if you like Night Tide, these are all things, Night of the Ghouls, these are all things that I think if you're a fan, you'll find something to like in here. And shout out to Steckler, who I haven't seen the rest of his movies yet. I am curious based on this, but the fact that he got this made and that he hustled it around the same way William Castle might, and literally would dress himself up like a monster at a show in order to make that finale hit harder for people. Like, it's dedication. You don't do that unless you love doing this and you have a passion for it. So I think you feel that energy and that attitude, as Charles put it in the movie. So
yeah, I totally agree. I'd also give it a 3. I think it's a lot of fun. It can be disjointed in moments, but I think that's also kind of part of the charm. And oddly enough, when it does all come together, like especially in that nightmare sequence, he kind of does put all of these themes and ideas together in one awesome little sequence. So I think he's definitely doing more that's intentional than might initially appear as you're giving this a first time watch. But I think he's got a lot of great ideas. And I mean, the fact that one of the cinematographers is the guy that did the Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it definitely helps.
And fucking Long Goodbye, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so
Blowout. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have even looked it up.
That is wild. Yeah, exactly. So and you can see some of those the shots that are really popping out. I feel like you got to give credit to those guys for sure. But I think you can see Steckler's dedication and just passion on screen, and that's what I always love. So I got to check out more of his stuff. Like I'm really interested in these first 4 here. Blood Shack. This is the one that you mentioned, I think, Charles, was the Rat Finka Boo Boo, Wild Guitar, and the Thrill Killers. Like I'm definitely gonna check these out and just dive into this guy a little more. So yeah, 3 for now, but it's he's awesome. I think I'm gonna. He is like an Ed Wood or something like that. I think it's someone that's just was not given the proper resources to really give the full vision of what he wanted, but he just tried anyway and
didn't care, said fuck you.
And I love that. I absolutely respect that. So great stuff.
Absolutely. For you, Charles.
Well, you know me, not big into ratings, so I'll just give him a 5 because he's a big part of my I'd say there's a handful of movies that just, or ones that really kind of when I was seeking a context to make movies, these 2 certainly films, well, obviously for wildly different reasons, played a big part, and I do love the fuck you. I love like that the monster masks as they came out were so clearly masks, and but within the movie it works for me, and and again I just love the ambition, the awkward results, but the ambition of these dance numbers that are just hilarious. I mean. And I don't know that much about dance, but I'm just like, come on! Like some of the movies, I was just
some
like,
of it's a little awkward for sure.
But it's I just love it because again, it's well within this world. This is how it happens, and in the beginning, with the guy, the businessman, the drunk businessman. He apparently is the money guy. Like the movie wouldn't have existed without that guy because, and he just wanted to be in the movie too, always wanted to be in a movie. And he does a creditable job, and when he does a spit take, like, I'm like, hey, bravo. That was a pro spit take, well done. I just love, the setup. You're just right in the movie, they're throwing acid in the guy's face. Then you have the POV of the, they're pouring liquid on, I guess, glass over the lens. And just the fact that I could see all the seams doesn't bother me. I like that, like, oh, okay. They threw water on something in front of the camera because they're not going to throw it on the camera. The fact that an effect is simple I don't find that's problematic for me at all. I mean, okay, that's how they did that. Okay. And no one wants to have acid poured in their face. So to me, I'm in. Where are we going now?
Yeah.
And then that introduction of his character when he's, I just want to have fun. It's like, hell yeah, man. And again, years later, and Return of the Living Dead actually, in Twisted Issues, I take the line, they came from out of the ground and they're after us. I have a character say that as a reference to the movie, but that whole, he got a job, what a dick, that just resonates for me. I mean, even now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Hell
yeah. How's retired life treating you?
Good, man. I used to work doing pest control, and it was, crawling under houses and crawling into attics. And, wow. I like the Lone Ranger part of it, because, wow, thank you. Yes, I've solved a problem in your life. But
my brain is rotted. I imagine all pest control guys are like the guy from Naked Lunch.
Well, that was something that made the job palatable to me when I first got it. Exterminator. I like that, but I also like, I would, a lot of the job was sales, and I would definitely, because I'm a punk, I would find ways to give free stuff, because
Oh, yeah.
It's just not my thing to do sales. And not even just to give free, but just like, hey, can I solve this problem for you without charging you? I would do that, which is totally against the tenets of the the pest control thing. But one of my customers, anyone else would have charged them $400 for this one, and I just said, well, this is, you can do it this way, you're not going to charge me? And I said, I am burdened by ethics. And he just kind of goes, oh, okay. I don't even know if he appreciated it. And truthfully, I wasn't doing it for him anyway. It was just sort of like, I'm not going to charge this guy $400 for this thing. So anyway, yeah, I love being retired, and I got lots of shit to do. I mean, the joke about retirement. I got a lot of shit to do. I mean, I'm finishing up the Twisted Issues Blu-ray and
awesome
stuff like that. And
oh, hell yeah. Vinegar Syndrome's working with you on that as well, same as the Red Spirit Lake We Await one?
Yes, it'll be a Vinegar Syndrome. Awesome. Yeah. So...
Well, we will tell all of our listeners to go and buy that. We were recommending the Red Spirit Lake one last week.
That's awesome.
I work in Blu-rays and stuff as well, and that was one of the ones where I watched it and I was like, I could not believe how much stuff that they managed to get on that, and how many interviews you did for it, and how much stuff they gave you. I was like, if anyone has, they put his short films on here. Like they got everything. Like go and check it out. But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap it up for this week's episode here. Once again, that was the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T from 1953, and incredibly strange creatures who stopped living and became mixed up zombies from 1964. Charles, we cannot thank you enough for joining us. Thank you for giving me that tongue twister of a read at the end of the show here.
Gotta take a breath. Yeah.
No, it's been wonderful to talk with you. Obviously, we're big fans of the movies. Can't wait to see Twisted Issues in beautiful 1080p Blu-ray.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Other than that, do you got anything else that's going on? This is normally where we have guests, if they've got anything, that we have them plug stuff. You got the new Blu-ray coming out, but can people follow you anywhere? Can they see your thoughts on movies if they have any other things they want to know?
I'm on Letterboxd as Praise the Child, which is a line from We Await.
Ooh, Praise the Child. I don't think I knew that. We're going to find you right now.
Yep.
I'm on Facebook as Charles Pinion, and I also have a Charles Pinion Artworks page on Facebook that I don't really... I put stuff up there occasionally, but it's more my visual art and stuff. But no, I don't really have much to plug, I mean, my main focus right now is getting the Blu-ray completed and the extras, more the extras than anything at this point, which is going to be a lot of band stuff from the 80s, house parties and such.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
We love that so much when we were talking about it, so we'd be very excited to see
cool.
that. But
yeah,
you've been a very fun Facebook friend as well. I saw that every time you post, you're updating what you're watching. I told Jamie you were watching the Jacques Turner Night of the Demon, which we covered on the show a couple months ago, and I was like, what a great movie. Speaking of fortune telling,
right. Oh my god. Well, my favorite line from that is I always like sliding down the snakes rather than climbing up the ladders.
Oh yeah.
Which actually thematically actually ties in with Cash Flag and he got a job.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. All right, my friends. This is great.
Anyway, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks so much. We're going to be back for our listeners, by the way, in 1 week's time, where we are going to be doing an episode over on the Patreon where we, as Jamie alluded to, we're going to be going haunted house mode. We are actually, funny enough, speaking of William Castle, we're going to be doing another episode with William Castle. We're going to be talking about his big one, House on Haunted Hill, which we have not talked about yet. So I'm excited to talk about that. We're going to be pairing it with the Robert Wise film, The Haunting.
Oh my god! Oh my god! That to me is the scariest. Sorry, I don't mean to cut in, but yeah, I saw that one.
No.
I saw that was like I don't know, 8 or 10 or something, and it was on TV, and I wasn't like watching the movie. I was kind of sleeping, but I'd come out and hi, mom and dad, whatever, and that moment at the top of the spiral staircase in the library when the wife opens the trap door that possibly was the biggest scare I'd ever had at that point in my life. And that movie, I think that movie legitimately holds up and is terrifying. But anyway, I'd like.
Hell yeah. Well, we're going to be talking about it next week. So Charles loves it. Everyone should come and check it out. That's going to be over on the Patreon next week. We're going to be talking about House on Haunted Hill and The Haunting. And it perfectly sets us up because the guest who's coming on in 2 weeks' time picked a very unconventional double feature that I needed to set us up for, which is The House on Haunted Hill and The Haunting. Which you might be like, what? What do you mean? The 1999 version remakes of both of those movies, because they were both remade in the same year. Funny enough, one by William Malone, who was the director behind Fear.com, and the other by Jan Dubont, the cinematographer turned director who directed Speed.
I forgot that Dubont did one of those remakes,
So we are going to be double dosing on House on Haunted Hill and The Haunting, both the originals and the remakes over the next 2 weeks. That's what we are going to be doing over on the show. So if you're interested in either of those, stick around. But that being said, that wraps it up for everything this week. Thanks so much for listening, and keep it sleazy.
Keep it sleazy, everybody.